battle for the mind of North America will be fought in the video arena.
Thank you. Now, before our next speaker, we're going to have Mark Donnelly perform the anthem again for us.
Yeah, a couple of people weren't here this morning, and they won't be here at 5. So here we go again. Happy Alberta Day, and this is a brand new anthem, minted. Actually, it was a week ago. It was finished last Monday. So this is an anthem that Father Joseph Jacobson and I collaborated on the words with. Actually, it's mostly Father Jacobson. I just tweaked it a bit to fit my tune. So here we go. And if anybody wants a copy of the music, I have some copies over here. Love you all to be be singing it. You don't have to sing it in the key that I sing it in, of course, unless we're singing together, then it'd be nice if we're in the same key. But otherwise, do it however you want to do it. Just make sure that you're praying for this great land of Alberta. Alberta, endowed with great beauty and charms, with mountains, broad prairies, vast ranches, lush farms, we toil to defend thy freedom, family, and faith, and pray God will keep thee secure in his grace. For thee do we thank the Creator so wise, for our home Alberta, our true paradise. All peoples who've lived here have known from the start a land rich in bounty, Alberta thou art, with woodlands and wilderness where wildlife abounds, where all folk may gather in cities and towns. For thee do we thank the Creator so wise, for our home Alberta, our true paradise. God bless Alberta.
Now, you're going to be stuck with me for a few minutes now. And I ain't going to sing for our mutual benefit. Instead, yes, our cameraman probably wants me to stand still. I like to go for a walk when I'm speaking. So, I'll start off by telling you a bit about my who I am and my past. And then I'm going to do my best to make you angry. Angry at the state of things in this country. So, who am I? As I said earlier, my name's Joel Mullen. I did close to 20 years in the Royal Canadian Navy. Unfortunately, I fell down a ladder and was invited to leave. So, that's where the cane came in. From there, moved back to Alberta. And I got back to Alberta just as the NDP were elected in. So I thought how great they followed me from the coast. So at that point, I decided I needed to get politically involved for the sake of my family. I'd seen what a disaster the NDP were in BC, and there's no way I could be tolerated here. So when Jason Kenney announced his Unite the Right plan, I was all in, and I worked on the first Progressive Conservative leadership for him, then the Unite the Right vote, then the second leadership for the new party. Mistakes were made, as I was to discover after COVID. In 2021, we had the greatest summer ever. You probably remember that. The greatest summer ever was followed by the harshest lockdown ever. And it was September of 2021. I remember we had a board meeting. See, I was on the provincial board at that point as a vice president of bylaw and policy for the United Conservative Party. So we had a board meeting in the start of September. And I asked him, I said, you've got to be under a huge amount of pressure here to bring in vaccine passports right now, because it's all the news is talking about. That, can you withstand the pressure? And he said, yes, absolutely. Vaccine passports are illegal, they're immoral, and they would never happen as long as he was premier. A couple weeks later, I was watching the news and watched him roll out vaccine passports. I hit the ceiling, stayed there for about 3 days till my wife peeled me off, at which point I wrote an email to the board saying we need to have a leadership review right now. And then I handed that email to the Western Standard just for the sake of clarity. Well, because I'd gone against him publicly, they decided I had violated board confidentiality, which I had not. I had not discussed anything the board had said in private. However, they used that as an excuse to throw me off the board, not that I was surprised by it. But that allowed me to go on the speaking tour and get out and fight the injustices that were coming non-stop at that point from the legislature. I was very pleased to work with a group called Take Back Alberta as one of their speakers in the leadership review for Jason Kenney. Mr. was at 51.3%. So we're very proud of that outcome, and I moved on to campaign for Danielle Smith, and I tell you, I'm still very, very proud of that. She doesn't do everything perfectly, but I think she's by far the best premier we could hope to have. So that's a bit of my background. Oh, and I also worked in the legislature for a while until my things caught up with me. Now for the making you mad part, I'm sure it'll come as no surprise to you when I say that Canada is broken, but it was built broken. It was never meant to work as a, excuse me here, it was never meant to work as an equal proposition for all its members. Canada was meant to work for the East. The East is Canada. Ontario, Quebec, Maritimes, that's what this country is designed to forward. And that's reflected in its basic institutions. And it's never been hidden. We had, there was one senator, forgive me, I've forgotten the name, but I think it was around 1903. He bluntly said that the only reason for developing the West is to enrich the East. This is laid out in our Constitution and our basic political structures. For example, Prince Edward Island, about, let's see, I think it's, about 180,000 people. So let's say a little less than Red Deer and Lethbridge combined. They get four MPs, and they also get 4 senators. That works out to an MP for every 45,000 people, roughly. Do you want to guess how many people per MP there are in Alberta? No one? 134,000. We have the lowest per capita representation in the country. Now, PEI is an extreme outlier, but it's not the only example of this. You've got Nova Scotia, for example, with 1 for every 98,000 people, or Newfoundland with 1 for every 78,000 people, or New Brunswick with 1 for every 86,000 people. It's rigged. Quebec gets 1 for every 116,000 people. They were supposed to end up with less MPs, but they argued that the grandfather clause meant they should be able to keep whatever they have. And of course, Parliament buckled because they've got a lot of votes. So your vote is worth, what, a third of that of somebody in PEI. How can you square that? How can that be in a democracy where in one region votes are worth X, in another region they're worth Y? How is that just? How is that fair? How can you run a country that way? Well, really you can't. But you can run a colony that way. And that's what I propose to you, is that the West, especially Alberta and Saskatchewan, are not provinces in actuality. They're colonies. They're colonies of the East. They're denied political power. Let's have a look at the disaster that's the Senate. The Senate is divided into regions. Maritimes is 1, Quebec 2, Ontario 3, the Western Provinces 4, and Newfoundland's just kind of by itself. Each region gets 24 senators. Newfoundland gets 6 in their own little world. 24 senators per region works out to 6 senators for Manitoba, 6 senators for Saskatchewan, 6 for Alberta, 6 for BC. Meanwhile, Quebec has a population of just over 9 million, which is less than double that of Alberta. Yet they have, 3 times as many, 4 times as many senators. How does that work? Ontario and Nova Scotia each get 10. And PEI, of course, as previously mentioned, gets 4. How is this supposed to work? Well, it does work. It works very well, but it doesn't work for us. So, to put it this way, you've got more senators in Nova Scotia, which is a population less than Edmonton, than Alberta. You have 4 more senators for a population less than our capital city. Are you mad yet?
Oh yeah.
No. The East has quite literally got their boot on our throat. But they throw us a bone every once in a while and hope we won't notice. And that's on us. The West has put up for this for, well, we're coming up to 120 years this year. 120 years of tolerating this arrangement that's enshrined in our Constitution. So what's our way forward? What can we do? Well, part of the answer is probably a referendum. But I would propose to you that something else needs to happen as well. And ideally it would happen before a referendum. And that's a constitutional conference. This country needs to be remade from the ground up. Now, would the East go for it? I don't know. I don't know that they would. I would like to think that they, if they saw the choice, if they didn't, that Alberta would walk. But I think they would just have their heads in the sand and let us go. But I think it's important that we try. It would be ideal, to my mind, to remake this Canada into a democratic and fair country for all, rather than to rip it down. But I'm prepared to rip it down. If this situation continues, it's intolerable. We have such a small voice compared to the rest of the country that it's truly, well, it's humiliating. And then, of course, you look at what's going on in the East. Nobody's paying attention. If they are paying attention, they're saying, oh, look, Alberta's whining again. There's no understanding in the East of what's going on out here. And again, I think that's partly on us. In a perfect world, I wouldn't mind if the Alberta government spent money on an advertising campaign in Eastern Canada just pointing out these inequities. It's time to start the conversation, to force the conversation. No. But here we are. So again, what can you do? Well, when the time comes, sign the petition for the referendum. But you can do more. You can get involved with the Alberta Next panel, and quickly, it's ending soon, through the online function especially. It allows you to do some surveys and write comments especially, and I'd encourage you to do so. I also encourage you to meet with your MLA. Meet with or write your MLA. And when I say write, I mean write a physical letter. They carry a much, much more weight in the political world than, say, an email or a phone call. Phone calls are easy. You let their answering machine take care of it. Emails, well, I've probably got a boilerplate answer saved in my computer anyway that I'll just slap on that, fire it right back at you after 2 weeks. Physical letters mean somebody's actually taken the time to write that letter, to print it, to put it in an envelope, buy a stamp for it, and put it in a mailbox. Provincially, you do. So they carry a lot more weight because they indicate a lot more effort was made. So I'd encourage each of you to write your MLA and give them a piece of your mind. Tell them what you want to see for this province. Tell them what you demand that they do. Now I'll come back briefly here to how to get the East's attention. One of the things that we could do, and I'm a big supporter of this, is to bring to leave the Canada pension plan and create an Alberta pension plan. All of the studies that have been done on it have shown that if that were to be done, both premiums could go up, benefits could go up and premiums could go down. Right now we are a net contributor to it. And a lot of that money that's in the pot right now would have to be coughed up and provided as seed money for our new Alberta pension plan. Now Quebec runs its own plan and it's integrated with CPP to allow people to transfer from one province to another. There's no reason why that can't happen with an Alberta pension plan. Doing this would be a hell of a shock for Ontario and the Maritimes. This might be the ideal method of grabbing them and shaking them and waking them up. I don't know that it would be. I can't promise that it would be, but I would like to hope that the magnitude of such a move would get the attention that we're so desperate for. So that's some food for thought, and I'll be back tomorrow with a lot more detail and some more thoughts on where we can go. But I think we're going to take a short break here while we track down the next speaker. So we'll be back momentarily.
Welcome, everyone. Unlike Cory and Zane, I had to write mine down. 63 years old, this is reality. My name is Brad Laforge. In addition to being the Calgary director for the UCP, I serve as a director on the Bow Valley Credit Union Board, both positions I'm extremely proud of. I stand before you today as a proud third-generation Albertan. I was born in Westlock, Alberta in 1962 and have resided in Calgary since 1971. My grandparents farmed just north of Edmonton, and my paternal grandfather, along with his brother, ran a business digging water wells for families and farms across the county. It was how they made their living, but it was more than just a job. They were known not just for the work they did, but for the trust they built and the relationships they formed, and the way they showed up for people when it mattered. That's the kind of spirit that built Alberta, entrepreneurial, hardworking, and deeply rooted in community. As a business owner myself in Alberta, my family and I have been blessed to build a life filled with opportunity and pride, a true testament to what hard work and determination can achieve. That's why I'm ready to fight for everything I have for the Alberta I grew up in. So future generations won't just have a chance, they'll have the freedom to chase their dreams and build their own legacy. Before anything else, I want to recognize Sean and his team of volunteers. Thank you for your tireless work and your love for this province. You brought us all together, and your efforts don't go unnoticed. Also, thank you to Chris Scott for so generously opening this space to all of us. These gatherings matter, they bring hope, and they bring momentum. When Shane asked me to speak today, I didn't even pause. I said yes immediately. But if I'm being honest, I had a moment of doubt. With such an impressive lineup of voices, what could I possibly add? So I sat down and I thought about what Alberta means to me. Not just a place on a map, but as an idea, a feeling. And in that quiet moment of reflection, I remembered a voice that continues to echo in my mind today. A man named John Martino. Some of you may know John. Alongside his wife, Kate Graham, he helped create something powerful. I am Albertan. It wasn't just a slogan, it is a movement, a platform where everyday people from every corner of this province could share their stories, their pride, and their love for Alberta. We lost John last fall, and that loss was deeply felt. But his message, his spirit, it's still here. And with Kate's blessing, I want to honor John's legacy today by sharing words he spoke in an APP meeting in Northeast Calgary back in July 2022. Back then, his message struck a chord. Today, 3 years later, it rings louder than ever. Before I share John's words, I want to be clear with you. I'm speaking to you today as a proud Albertan, as your neighbor, and yes, I am the director of the United Conservative Party, but what I am about to share reflects my personal views. They may not align exactly with the party's official position, and that's okay, because to me, leadership isn't about sticking to a script. It's about saying what you believe and standing by it. So, these are John's words from July 2022. Freedom comes from knowledge, and knowledge comes from seeking truth. Today, it is my hope that you will leave here a little more knowledgeable about the choices Albertans can make about their future through educational information put forth by the APP. I'd like to share with you why I decided to become a member of the Alberta Prosperity Project. First, though, I want to tell you a story. In January of 2014, my oldest son and I were staying in a hotel on the beach of a famous town called Courseulles-sur-Mer in France. Most of you will know it by its more famous name, Juno Beach. My father had enlisted in the Canadian Army in September of 1940, and I had come into possession of a book that chronicled the movements of his regiment from 1939 until 1946. And it was the reason we had come here. He landed at Juno Beach a few weeks after D-Day, and I wanted to stand on the same ground as he had. On D-Day, the Allies landed at low tide in order to maneuver around the mines and blockades the Germans had placed there to thwart an invasion. My son and I walked out one night to the point where the tide was starting to come in. As we turned around to go back, I was stunned to see that we were about a kilometer from where the ocean would crash against the seawall in about 12 hours. But even more terrifying was the fact that we were standing about 30 feet lower than the high tide. Those young men had to go forward into a hail of enemy bullets that was coming from behind us, a 6-foot seawall, or drown. Against all odds, in a venture that should have completely failed, they accomplished the impossible and in the process changed the course of history. The sacrifices they made that day and the ones that made Canadians before them forged a nation and an identity that became a beacon of freedom for the world to take refuge in. It was not a legacy that we inherited. It was a legacy that we were entrusted with, one that we were asked to stand on guard for. When I first heard the words that the APP were using to describe their vision of the benefits of a new sovereign constitutional republic of Alberta, I felt like I was betraying Canada, betraying my father, and betraying my family. Even though I knew the Canada that I believed in and grew up in no longer existed. The Canada that I believed in would not have tolerated a prime minister lying to them and breaking the law. The Canada that I believed in had a functional, independent press that held us all accountable. The Canada that I believed in held the Charter of Rights and Freedoms as the supreme rule of the land and the cornerstone of our democracy. The Canada that I believed in would not have deployed the very forces that have sworn an oath to uphold that Constitution to brutally beat into submission peaceful protesters that put up no resistance and then raid their bank accounts. The Canada that I believed in would not have jailed pastors or made political prisoners out of their own citizens for standing up for the rights under our charter. The Canada that I believed in would have stood up to a government trying to divide Canadians and removed it from office. I ask myself, is this the vision of Canada I want to be part of? Do I still feel the same pride when I see the maple leaf flying? For me, the answer is no. Canada has become morally, ethically, and spiritually bankrupt. Our governments on all levels, as well as our bloated bureaucracies, have become completely dysfunctional, corrupt, and in my opinion, beyond repair. And as citizens, we have become complacent in the inherited wealth of our nation and expect someone else to come along and save us. I am not betraying Canada. I allowed Canada to betray me. Democracy is not a noun. It must always be a verb. It demands courage from its citizens to ensure that it remains the cornerstone of our freedom. It requires us to use our voices to maintain and protect it. Ottawa is in an abusive and caustic relationship with the whole country, and with Alberta in particular. And like every abuser, they are not going to willingly let go of their power. And don't deceive yourself. No matter who is in power in Ottawa, the results will always be the same for Alberta. To form a federal government in Canada, not a single vote from the 4 western provinces is required. Even though the West represents 1/3 of the population of the country, we have no voice. The 2 provinces that make up Central Canada have close to 60% of the seats in Parliament. Central Canada elects prime ministers, and since 1867 sets the policies for the entire country, regardless of the harm they inflict. Central Canada has no reason to consider Alberta's need for fair and equal treatment in confederation. But to put it more simply, they don't have to care, as it does not negatively affect their lives. We have people once again asking for our votes and promising us all sorts of things. But I have only one question for all of them. Where were your voices in the last 2 years? I heard nothing but silence from you as we faced tyranny. Alberta's salvation does not lay with Ottawa. No one is coming to save us. Our future is in our own hands. The only way out of an abusive relationship is by leaving, and the APP is showing us a clear and legal way to do that. A successful vote on independence would give an elected Alberta government the legitimacy within the law of the land to negotiate directly with Ottawa, to forge a fair and equal deal for our province, or risk losing us completely. This might just inspire other provinces and territories to do the same, so that they too can choose independence from Ottawa and negotiate a fair deal and an equal voice as sovereign provinces within Canada. The APP is a unique project as it is not a political party. It does not ask you to change your political beliefs in order to become a member. There is no left, there is no right. It is a vision of a free and prosperous Alberta for Albertans by Albertans. As we grow this movement and it becomes large enough, we will no longer have to suffer politicians telling us what they can do for us. It will be the APP members telling any potential party, if they adopt our visions and principles, what we could do for them. We can demand honesty and integrity and accountability in our political system. We will not have to depend on the media to get our message out. Politicians won't have to rely on opinion polls to know where we stand. I ask you to join me and walk this historic road together. Show your face, become involved, speak your truth, read the vision on the website, become a member and use your voice. Talk with family and friends about how we can become united and empower ourselves. Go for a coffee, have a barbecue, find an event and take a friend, or organize your own event. Be as brave as those who gave us the gift of our freedom. Our province and country are at a crossroads. The very fabric of our society is being destroyed by governments at all levels under the guise of keeping us safe. Plausibility is used as a subtitle to science-based evidence to scare us, and then fear is used to justify enacting emergency measures to bypass our constitutional rights and freedoms. Enough is enough. It is our turn to stand up and be counted. Much like the young men on the beach that day, there is nowhere to retreat, and the tide is creeping in. We can cower on the beach and drown, or be as courageous as them and march bravely towards our destiny and also accomplish the impossible. That choice is ours, and history will be our judge. I leave you with this. Beware of politicians offering you free stuff. The price you pay is your freedom. Rest in peace, John. Onward we go. I'd now like to invite John's wife, Kate Graham, up on the stage. She's going to sing us a song or two. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Brad. That was lovely to hear those words that my husband John wrote and spoke at an APP meeting in July of 2022. We miss him like crazy, and but his spirit is still here in this movement, and every one of you has been a friend to us in this movement, and we appreciate every single one of you and encourage you all to get out there and do whatever you can to keep this movement going. I'm just going to sing a little song. Some of you may know it. Ready? Oh Lord, won't you bring us independence? Ottawa is killing us. We must make amends. Worked hard all our lifetimes, no help from those friends. Oh Lord, won't you bring us independence? Oh Lord, won't you get us a way to be free from Ottawa, from the Liberals, from the NDP? I wait for delivery each day until 3. Oh Lord, won't you get us a way to be free? Oh Lord, won't you give us just one night without no clowns? No Trudeau, no Carney, no Nenshi to bring us down. Prove that you love us and get them the hell out of town. Oh Lord, won't you give us just one night without no clowns? Everybody, oh Lord, won't you bring us independence? Ottawa is killing us. We must make amends. Worked hard all our lifetimes. No help from those friends. Oh Lord, won't you bring us independence? Thank you. Thank you. Just a little independence song. And I'm going to sing this other one. You can sing along if you kind of know it. This little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. This Alberta light. This Alberta light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This Alberta light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This Alberta light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Jesus gave me the light, I'm gonna let it shine. Jesus gave me the light, I'm gonna let it shine. Jesus gave me the light, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Thank you very much. God bless.
Yeah, I like this T-shirt too. I was given it. A vendor over there gave it to me. It's awesome. Well, good morning, everybody. It's another beautiful day in Mirror, Alberta, although it's really smoky. It's strange. The last few years, our province seems to be majority of the time smoky. And I was thinking to myself the other day, why don't we just buy some equipment, some water bombers, maybe improve our forestry practices, maybe stop spraying Roundup on our forests, that kind of thing. And then I remembered that our federal government sends billions of dollars to other countries for initiatives that we have nothing to do with. There's a Facebook meme going around. I saw this about a week ago, and it says something like, you know, with the money we just sent to Ukraine, we could have bought 50 water bombers, fully crewed water bombers to fight forest fires and benefit us. And with the leftover money, we could buy another 250 of them. So for what we sent to fund a war that we have nothing to do with, we could have 300 water bombers, fully crewed, fully staffed, ready to go fighting fires, preventing maybe what we're seeing around us. But I digress. This morning, I actually wanted to just share some experiences that I've had in the last few years. Most of you already know my story. You know that I bought the Whistle Stop Cafe in 2019 because I came out of 20 years in the oil patch and ended up unemployed because of some political crap in the company I worked for. And I decided, you know what, I'm done with this feast or famine lifestyle. I'm done with being a part of an industry that the government constantly is attacking and decimating. You know, I just want to do something where I'm under the radar and leave something for my kids. So I decided to buy this little restaurant in July 2019. 6 months later, the government interfered in a way that I never ever thought they would, and here we are. So, over that period, I've had the blessing and the curse of meeting a lot of people, a lot of very influential people. I've met premiers, MLAs, you know, other politicians, bureaucrats, people that run healthcare stuff, like all sorts of people. I've been involved in many different initiatives, including the Alberta Prosperity Project, Take Back Alberta, stuff with the UCP. I've even advocated for people to buy NDP memberships to vote in the leadership race that they had, which was that was pretty fun. And I think about these things when I see something today. I think back to, you know, things that we've worked on in the past. Like when I first started my civil disobedience here, Jason Kenney was the premier. There were some pretty nasty people in his cabinet. You know, we were watching them tell us that we couldn't go outside, we couldn't operate our businesses, we couldn't gather, we had to be 6 feet apart. Then we see pictures of them in the Sky Palace drinking Jameson whiskey and having a gay old time. And it really was, it was insane. But out of that, we learned how we can deal with government, how we can influence politics, supposedly to our benefit. Now, throughout this whole time, I always believed that anything other than focusing on a sovereign Alberta, an independent Alberta, where we have our own constitution, our own enforcement, and that sort of thing, I always thought everything else was kind of a waste of time. Even removing Jason Kenney. You might remember the TBA days when the goal was to remove Jason Kenney as the premier and get somebody else in there. And I went to lots of TBA meetings. I would share my opinions about Alberta independence, and more often than not, I was told, you know, that's great, but it's never going to happen. We just need to get rid of Jason Kenney, and then everything's going to be fixed. And I'm like, well, that's not accurate at all. If we remove one person, put another person in, who's to say that this won't happen to us again? Oh, Chris, you don't know what you're talking about. We're going to get the board changed out. We're going to put freedom-minded Alberta sovereigntist people on the United Conservative Party board, and things will be better. And I'm thinking to myself, well, I don't believe that for a second. I don't think it's going to work out that way, but whatever, you know, we may as well do something and try something. And through all of those things, through all those initiatives, people were kind of like, yeah, Alberta independence would be great, but we need to focus on this. And I'm thinking, no, we need to focus on an independent Alberta because all this other stuff is fluff. Well, now, if you look through social media and you look in the news, you'll see 100% of the leadership of all of those groups, everyone that I was involved with, are all on board with the idea of Alberta independence now. And that's really wonderful. But it kind of makes me wonder, why didn't people pay attention in the first place? Like, why are we so distracted with Jason Kenney that we would ignore an opportunity for an independent Alberta? Why are we so scared of an NDP government that we don't speak up about what's really important, what really matters, and how we can make real changes? What is that all about? And I think the answer is there's two parts of it. The first one is a lack of education on how things work, who we are, what our position here is, that type of thing. And the other one is fear, of course. We get those who love the status quo because it's benefited them. They use fear to keep us in our little boxes. They use division to keep us fighting amongst each other. They use our slight cultural differences or major cultural differences or political leanings as a way to compartmentalize us so that we can't work together, or we think we can't work together. And it's a problem. I see some of those barriers are being broken now. I mean, there's a lot of groups that want different things for this province. Some want an independent Alberta, sovereign nation of Alberta. Some want a stronger Alberta with less interference from Ottawa within Confederation. Some want Alberta to be a 51st state. Some want Alberta to be within Canada in the European Union. How crazy is that? But the reality is, even though we have those differences, even though those groups like Take Back Alberta, Alberta Prosperity Project, some political parties, they have different ideas on where we should, or on how we should get there, all of us kind of have the same goal: a sovereign Alberta that's free and prosperous. And the uniting factor here isn't a left or a right or a party thing or anything like that. The uniting factor is that if we want anything to change at all, we need some leverage. I've said many times, all paths lead to Alberta independence. All paths. If you want a stronger Alberta within Canada, we need some leverage that we've never had before, because we need to open and change the Constitution. And there's no leverage that we could possibly have other than a successful referendum on Alberta sovereignty, Alberta independence. Same thing if you want an independent nation of Alberta. We need that referendum. This is something that we understand and have been able to unite behind. And that's why now, if you look at any of those groups' pages, they all kind of share each other's things, promote each other's things. We're working together towards that goal. Even some who disagree with us, who are completely on the other side of this conversation, are helping us. My friend Thomas Lukasik, he actually put a petition, a referendum question to Elections Alberta saying, how did it go? Do you agree that Alberta should remain in Canada? Or something like that. And unfortunately, their petition isn't going very well. They're 60 days into the 90 days. They don't have nearly enough signatures to trigger the referendum via the Citizens Initiative Referendum Act. But if they did, that would be wonderful for me. Absolutely wonderful. Because I want to ask Albertans that question. I want the question of Alberta's position within Canada to be asked to the people of Alberta. Now, there's some people out there, some politicians that they would call me an extremist, a right-wing lunatic, because I want to ask the people a question. But since when is asking a society or a group of people which direction they want to go extreme? Since when is direct democracy an extremist view? And why are these people so hell-bent on trying to cause public outrage at people like me who simply want to ask the question? Well, probably because the status quo has benefited them tremendously. I think Mr. Lukasik has benefited tremendously off the taxpayer. He used to be the Deputy Premier of Alberta. I think he had a pretty lucrative political career, and of course he doesn't want that to end. Our federal MPs, many of them, they end up with a pretty decent pension, way better than the Canada Pension Plan payment, by the way, after 8 years of service. So how many of them would want to see Alberta withdraw? You know? And they're not going to help us anyway. I'm happy that Jason Kenney resigned. That kind of felt good. It was a warm, fuzzy feeling to watch him quit. I'm happy that we put some good people on the board of the United Conservative Party. But at the end of the day, none of that is going to make the changes or the difference that we need. Those changes only happen when average, everyday Albertans like you and me get to work and we start talking to each other, educating each other about the merits and benefits of an independent Alberta. Even our friends in the NDP, they make the job very easy for us. I get because I'm a member of the NDP, the Alberta NDP, I get a newsletter every couple days, and it's fantastic. Sometimes the headline is, "Keep Danielle Smith's hands off your pension. She's trying to steal your pension." Sometimes it's, "The UCP is selling your hospitals and privatizing healthcare." So when I read these things, I'm like, oh, this is excellent. I have something to talk about. I have content because they're lying again. The email about the pension, that was particularly fantastic because whether they knew it or not, the NDP is actually giving us a benefit of Alberta independence. The NDP is giving us talking points as to why we need to be an independent nation. They say, keep the UCP and Danielle Smith's hands off your pension. Okay, I don't want politicians grabbing our pension money and taking it either. But what happens right now? Whose hands is our pensions in right now? Well, it's in some form of government. It's managed by the feds through acts of parliament. So some government is legislating the direction that our pension goes, the way our pension is managed. Right now, it's managed by the federal government. And as an Albertan, do you feel that you can vote or elect an MP that is going to effectively convey your values and your desires on how our pension is run in Parliament? Can you vote? Can we vote in Alberta, elect representatives, send them to Ottawa, and change how our pension is managed? We can't. We cannot. And the reason is, it's something I mentioned yesterday, I think Kathy touched on today. We are severely underrepresented. And that's not an accident. That's by design. The design was that the Dominion of Canada has all of these colonies under their jurisdiction in a confederation, and Eastern and Central Canada can benefit from that. They didn't necessarily want us to influence how government is or how the country is run. They just wanted us to send money, send resources. They wanted the great trade of the prairies to enrich their lives and build up their factories. And that's what they got. So when it comes to our pension, the NDP are one of the biggest advocates for an Alberta pension plan, whether they know it or not. They want government's hands out of our pensions. And if you put that in the perspective of how we can influence government, it's much better that a government that we elect and is accountable to us is managing something like that than one who isn't. One for Alberta independence. Another great one is the landlocked scenario. I hear this all the time. Alberta is landlocked. If we become independent, we're going to be landlocked. What are we now? Do we have access to a port right now? No, we're landlocked. And yet we are part of a confederation and we can't move our resources to Tidewater. Why is that? Is it because we're landlocked? No, that doesn't change. We can't pick up Alberta and move it to the coast. So if it's not landlocked that's causing us to be fail to move our products to international markets, there's something else. What is it? Is it our government here in Alberta? No, our government wants to move product because that generates an insane amount of royalty revenue and it makes the governments look good because they have big budgets and things. The feds don't want us to. We're policy locked. They've created policy that prevents us from being prosperous. Now, okay, we live in a democracy, so why don't we just go and vote and we'll change the federal government to one that's more aligned with Alberta values and wants Alberta to prosper, and then we'll get that stuff done. Let's do it. Let's elect a conservative federal government in Alberta and all our woes will be fixed. Right? Wrong. What did we do just not even months ago? We elected almost every single riding in this province is conservative. And what changed? I'll tell you what changed. The East put their elbows up and caused huge problems for our farmers. Alberta cannot control its own destiny, cannot chart its own course now or ever within this confederation. And people like Thomas Lukasik, they love that because it is a guaranteed paycheck. We can elect MPs here. They can pretend they're doing all these great things for us. They'll serve 8 years, get a pension that we pay for. Nothing changes. They continue to be prosperous. We continue to be under the boot of the federal government. So you can imagine how I've felt over the last 4 or 5 years, whatever it is, when we're starting to make some advancements and starting to educate people as to why we need to be sovereign, and then somebody comes along and they say, no, we just need to deal with this politician right now. No, that's wrong. It's always been wrong. What we've missed this entire time is the concept of sovereignty. Electing a different premier doesn't advance Alberta sovereignty. Danielle Smith she's a very intelligent, eloquent, well-spoken person. I love how she says, if you don't want to get beat up, then don't break into people's houses. You don't hear politicians say that kind of thing very often, and I commend her for that. But even her, she kind of gives this impression that she doesn't want an independent Alberta. She wants things to be fixed. And I guess I can understand, because that's where I was a couple years ago. I wanted everything to be fixed, the Constitution to be amended, us to be elevated to an equal partnership with the rest of the Confederation, and get on with our lives, wave our Canadian flags. But it's not going to happen. It can't happen. It's not meant to happen. It was designed not to be allowed to happen. And that means we need to do something different. And the something different is regular people just saying no to the tyranny of the East. And I know that's kind of a scary thing. It's any type of major change like that is scary, and you hear the what ifs all the time. Oh, well, what about our military? As soon as we become independent, the U.S. is going to invade us. Really? We have as much chance of space invaders invading us as we do the U.S. invading an independent Alberta. Oh, well, what are we going to do about a military? What are we going to do about currency? What if, what if, what if? There's a lot of what ifs for sure. And it's a little bit scary. But the question that I find terrifying is, what if we don't do anything? If we fail to act and we don't change the trajectory this province and this country is on, what's going to happen then? How far are we going to go down this spiral? The United States just had the president declare that there are males and females. How far have we gone down this spiral that the president has to make a declaration as to our genders? We have government stepping in and telling activists in our school boards, no, you cannot have pornography in our libraries. And then people are fighting for it. The Edmonton School Board right now is literally fighting the provincial government to keep pornography in the libraries. And if you don't believe me, there's plenty of content on the internet. You can go and see what they're fighting. How far are we going to allow this to go? Municipalities all over Alberta are adopting and implementing agendas and policies written by people that don't live in Canada, don't care about Canada, have no interest in Canada, and aren't accountable to us, telling us that we need to design our cities in such a way that you don't have to move more than 15 minutes from where you live. Now, I think we do that already. That's a fantastic idea, and we want to be close to our services, but that's not what it is. They want it to be further. They want to say, not only should you must. You can't go more than 15 minutes. There's already cities in Europe that have districts like that. Yeah, this is the 15-minute city thing. It's not a conspiracy theory. It's a actual policy that municipal governments across Alberta are trying to adopt. Now, does that sound like it's to our benefit? Oh, of course it is, because we need to reduce CO2, which is what our plants eat. Otherwise, the world is going to light on fire by 2016, quote Al Gore. So it's to our benefit, right? Wrong. It's not. It's not to our benefit. And the only way we can stop it is if we just say no and we remove ourselves from that structure that's allowing it to happen. our provincial government is trying to fight some of this stuff. They did some modifications to some legislation that allow the province to step in and stop municipalities from doing that sort of thing. The only problem with that is it also allows a government that's opposed to our views to do the same thing. So that's a problem. They're trying to fix these things with statute law, with legislation, when really what we need is we need this stuff enshrined in the Constitution so that it can't happen in the future. The only way to do that is if we write our own, because the criteria for changing the Canadian Constitution is purposefully almost impossible. But it's not impossible for us to do it. We have politicians that we admire and we think are great. Then they do one thing and we throw a hissy fit and we're not going to vote for them. They're WEF or they're whatever. They're a Freemason. They're an Illuminati. They're spraying us with pumps and nozzles. Everything else about them is great, but they're not perfect. So we throw a fit and don't vote. That's how we lost the 2015 election and ended up with Rachel Notley as the premier. People just failed to get involved because they were upset about politicians not being perfect. The unfortunate thing is if we're looking at our politicians to be perfect and save us, we've got things quite wrong. If we're looking for perfection and salvation, the answer is Jesus. It's not a politician. No politician is perfect. So that means that we have a big responsibility in any kind of a democratic society. If we don't do the work, somebody else is going to. And quite often, it's people who don't share our values. So that leads us to Alberta independence again, with a constitution that enshrines the values of faith, family, and freedom, that prioritizes individual liberties and freedom with responsibility, and completely casts aside the anti-human, ideologically driven agendas that the New World Order wants to thrust upon us. To Alberta independence. That's it. No. If any of you want any information on the Whistle Stop Cooperative that we just had our founding meeting on a couple days ago, with the purpose of purchasing the entire Whistle Stop property, brand, and business from me, please come and see me or Shane or Bonnie over, you can find them over at the far northwest booth, and you probably can't find me because I generally hide when there's crowds. But I'm happy to talk to you about it if you find me. Thanks.
Well, Alberta Day. Like this, can't be understated the importance of this. I mean, this is history in the making. This is change. This isn't just a minor observation. This is a step towards what will be, one day, Alberta Independence Day. And part of that is building a culture, building a movement, building something more than just a bunch of people who get pissed off every few months and then settle down again. And we are our own worst enemy to a degree. And I was thinking about that before I came up, just with opportunities. Like, this is brilliant, though. Getting people together, getting Albertans together, celebrating what we are, what we're going to be, what we're moving towards. You know, anger will only get us so far. We got lots to be angry about, and I'll talk about a little bit of that. We got to talk about the positivities, too, though, and what we're going to get post-independence, the freedoms, the community, the proper society. We're supposed to be moving ahead in society. We're supposed to be getting better. And I think a lot of us are. But we're allowing another element to slip in that's counter to goodness, counter to freedom, counter to humanity. And it's bizarre. There's a horrific story I saw with a child that was terribly harmed out in Ontario. And this was a person allegedly, I guess, who did it, broke into a home, had been released not too long ago, in before. And lo and behold, identifies as a she, her. It's a man. And, well, probably be loose in a few more months to do it again. This is a broken society. This is a sick society when some of the most obvious things we claim we can't seem to solve because this system is broken. But we've let it get broken. That's part of our challenge. This year we have our municipal elections. This is a big deal, and this is where we drop the ball a lot. Something that's been big on the news lately, and we're watching that protest from the Edmonton Public School Board. They're doing this protest against Alberta because Premier Smith dared to say we're not allowed to have books in children's libraries depicting pairs of men sucking each other off. I wish that was parody. I wish I was making a joke, but it illustrates how ridiculous it's gotten. So they did this protest and pulled down hundreds of books and said, well, we can't determine what's good or bad, so we have to pull them all. Really? If you can't tell the difference between a couple of guys servicing each other and Atlas Shrugged, you don't deserve to be on a school board. But who puts them on a school board? How many people can name their school board trustee? You get to vote on them. I got to admit, I'm no better. I actually had to Google mine, and I've already forgotten her name because I'm in Ward 3 of Foothills County, south of Calgary. And most of them get acclaimed every year because nobody even runs against them. So when we see a school board do something as absurd and ridiculous as that, though, whose fault is it? We get a chance, and we haven't been taking advantage of it. So it's one thing to get mad, and we should, but it's another thing to do something about it. And there's lots of people working on doing something about it. Those are the people who come here. Those are the people watching this live stream. And this is the base that we got to build. As I'm getting back to Ward, in building this community out here, in building a movement, because, yeah, the election, everybody was outraged, everybody was getting active, everybody was getting galvanized, and then it kind of slowed down. And then something else comes up in the news, everybody gets worked up, and then it slows down, but it gets slower and slower, and we kind of forget why we were worked up in the first place. I wrote the book, but I haven't read it in a long time. But the analogy I use quite often is when this happens, we got to treat it like waves that are coming in. We let the wave come in of rage, of willingness to change, but then we let the wave go out again. We got to capture it every time. We got to grab people, and people are doing it. The Alberta Prosperity Project's been doing a fantastic job. Organizers out here have been doing a great job, and that's what we've got to keep doing, is building it. Every time that wave comes in, we keep a little more. So that movement is there when the event happens, because we know it's going to happen. The futility, the frustration. As well, when we have a community, we're better to be able to set aside the stuff that I talked about that makes us our own worst enemy. You know who conservatives like fighting more than liberals? They like fighting other conservatives. Boy, we love fighting with each other and with ourselves and finding reasons to turn on our heel and stomp out of the room. And that's what really destroys us so often. When you got a community, it's harder to do that to ourselves. When it's your friend, when it's your compatriot, when it's somebody else you met, you can still be mad at them. You can still disagree with them, but you'll get together the next time and you'll still work together for the common goal. That's the things we got to think about this weekend. That's the things we got to think about in the future with this movement, with this culture, with this base that's being formed. Focus on our commonality. Focus on what's holding us together. Focus on the freedom that we all respect with each other. I mean, I'll talk about it. You know, I'm a social media creature. And I put my views out there, and not everybody agrees with them. They shouldn't. It'd be kind of weird if they did. But for an example, I don't have a problem with vaccinations. That's me. My big problem is coerced vaccinations. My big problem is taking the choice away from people with vaccinations. You've got to allow full, free choice, and that means no coercion coercion they're trying to use. Oh, you have a choice. Yeah, you have a choice to lose your job, lose your ability to travel, lose your ability to have your children be in school and sports, lose the ability to go to a restaurant. That's not a choice. It has to be a choice. But some people got very upset with me. Oh, Cory, that's just the vax talking. Oh, your brain's damaged from the vaccinations. Oh, I can't listen to you anymore because you took a vaccination. Well, if you talk to me that way because I chose a vaccination, you're no better than those crazed leftists who are saying you should be forced to get a vaccination. The bottom line that we have to agree on is freedom. That's what counts. That's what we forget. And if we can just always focus on the freedom, we can still fight with each other on the other issues and subjects, but still stick together on the freedoms. We got to start talking now about what will things look like post-independence then? What are these freedoms going to look like? What sort of world do we want to live in? What sort of system do we want to have? And that's a big discussion. It's a tough one because we have different points of view. I've been debating with Bruce Party online a little bit. Bruce and I agree on 95% of everything. But there's been, for example, a discussion coming up on the digital identification, or the Alberta healthcare card, that's been traditionally printed on a piece of toilet paper that you got to go through everything if you accidentally run it through the laundry to get another copy of. And they're moving that to a plastic and, yes, a digital potential form of that ID. And some people are concerned about it, very worked up. Personally, I think somebody put it well, the ship has kind of already sailed. There's nothing new already. You go into motor vehicles, they have all your information there already. You go into a hospital, they've already got all your healthcare information centralized there. How it's presented in a form of identification isn't the bigger target. But a centralized ID where the government controls everything. I understand the worry because, yes, the government can shut you down. But guys, that ship sailed. We already saw that. They can already seize your bank account. They can already pull your kids out of the schools. They can already pull your driver's license. They can already pressure you in so many ways. When we're busy fighting with each other over the form of the identification, we're forgetting that already left the room, guys. So we need the protections in place to keep us as free, living, sovereign individuals, no matter what bloody piece of ID we have, whether it's digital, paper, or plastic. But we're busy fighting with each other over the form of it. And we've forgotten that we already kind of lost the battle. Freedom, guys, freedom. So what do? I'm trying to get Bruce on my show soon because he's a brilliant guy and we could talk about that. How do we entrench those freedoms into a free Alberta so that a government can't do that to us later? The hazard to us, I've said that in past speeches, isn't a left versus right thing. It's authoritarians versus freedom. And people on the fringe of either side will infringe on your freedoms if they can get away with it. I don't want an authoritarian telling me what to do, whether they're on the far right or the far left. Just leave me the hell alone. But how do we stop that? We got the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. And people have forgotten what that thing was drafted for, supposedly. It's to protect us against the government. It's not to give the government the ability to step on us. They've got it backwards. They've interpreted it wrong and they're using it wrong. So when they can sit there and claim that somehow the charter right to safety trumps your charter right to mobility or speech or assembly, now you're using the charter as a tool to actually reduce freedoms. The charter is supposed to be the buffer between us and the state. This is part of the problem we have as a country that kind of evolved out of a monarchy rather than came out through a revolution. There's the difference between us and the United States. When the founders of the United States drafted their freedoms and such, with the amendments following, they were always keeping in mind protecting citizens from the state. They realized the biggest risk coming to you isn't from another country, it isn't from overseas, it's from your own damn government. And they built that in to make sure that people understood that. And it's starting to be eroded down there as well. But you need to have that charter of freedom should be a charter of limitations. And I don't mean on us, I mean on the government. These are the limits on what the government can do to us. So, where do we start that discussion, though? That's a big one. It's a hard one. We got a lot of people thinking on these things and having those debates. Because right now, we're kind of in a place of flux. The independence movement has really been growing. We're moving towards it. Things got stalled in the courts. The petitioning might not start till November, maybe afterwards, to move towards a referendum, which might be a year from now. Okay, fine. But it doesn't mean there's nothing to do. A question a lot of people are going to be asking is, what does it look like the day after? What if people vote yes? What does it look like the day after, the year after, or whatnot? So let's work on that. Let's talk about that. Let's discuss that. We've got to stay motivated. And it's easy to spin our wheels. But we've also got to show that we will be better and that we are better. And as I kind of started this off with, we've got a gross enemy of our own making, and that's apathy. So when we can have a school board that can't tell perversion and child porn from 1984, we've got to make that better. Because one of the things, and people kind of rightly be critical about it, they'll say, well, why would it be better in an independent Alberta if you guys can't even get your own backyard in order? And that's a good question. You know, are we just going to be a smaller version of what we just left? Then we haven't improved on what we've come out of, have we? So some of those steps: get up, pay attention to your municipal election, and vote as well as you can. It's going to be hard on those school board trustees because so many of them are acclaimed because nobody knows who they are, and they just step into it and they take the job. And you think, well, it's innocuous, it's harmless, it's just a school board trustee. Well, look at it. No, it's not. CBC and the statists and the rest in central Canada are all holding up Alberta saying, look, they're banning books, they're backwards, they're fascists, it's garbage. It's a school board out of control is what it is, but we let it get out of control. So get up and take advantage of those. Look at the lunatic we got in Calgary, Jyoti Gondek. You know, but who put her in? Whose job is it to get rid of her? Whose job is it to tame these crazed city councils? Because if we can do that this election, this fall, if we can improve it, if we can put good people in those positions, that will give more people confidence that, hey, this province does have their crap together and independence looks a lot better because we're better than the others. Stay on your provincial government. I'm typically supportive of a lot of what Premier Smith does, but I'm not with everything. We're going into deficit again. Why is your spending out of control? If we can't get our own spending out of control, why can we pretend that we're going to be better without Ottawa? We got to do this ourselves. One of the things I talked about in one of my past videos, for those who might watch those online, is the opportunity being brought with these municipal elections too. If you're not going to run, which I understand, I'm not running, so I'm not going to get on a high horse with that. But maybe find out who's running and make a choice and volunteer for somebody. Just take a bit of time and get out. And there's a few reasons for it. A lot of people, I mean, there's a lot of experienced campaigners here already, but there's a lot of people who have never campaigned before either. And we got one of the most important campaigns in Alberta history coming up very soon. And the more experienced people we can have on the ground, even with a bit of experience in a municipal campaign, the better. This is free training. Often, if it's a good campaign, they'll give you pizza and beer afterwards. But it teaches you those things on how does door knocking work? How does GOTV work? How does the databasing work? What about flyer drops? What about the legalities of going door to door? What about sign placement? All of those exact same rules are going to apply to the referendum. So why not get involved in a municipal campaign so you can learn some of those? Not only that, you're going to meet the other movers and shakers in your neighborhood. We know this from anybody who works with anything volunteer, whether it's your homeowners association or your local sports club or anything else. In reality, there's 6 people who do 90% of the work out of 50. But if you can find those 6, those are the ones who get things done. And those 6 are the ones that come out to those municipal campaigns. And if you're meeting them on there, you're networking with them, those are the people we want to be together with when the referendum campaign comes. So summer's coming to a close, still beautiful out. I know a lot of people not looking forward to winter. It's just the way it is being up here. But the political season starts again. So start easing into paying attention again, getting active again. We get that chance once every 4 years in these municipal elections. I'm not going to say whether one's, obviously some are better than the others, but I'm not going to try endorsing one or another with candidates and so on. But I'm just saying get up and have a look and take part. Because they're going to be managing the education of your children, whether you like it or not. They're going to be managing your local government, whether you like it or not. And I know it feels futile, but the closest you can come at least to controlling that is getting on board and getting involved with that campaign a bit. I mean, I know people have limited time, they have limited energy, but it's a good opportunity. At the very least, identify them and vote. I'm still as cynical as I am with decades of being a masochistic political nutcase, I still manage to get floored. I still manage to be astounded when I see it framed that taking pornographic images out of libraries where there are elementary school-aged children is considered controversial. And to get further, to watch legacy media run cover for them, to watch them only report half of the story, to watch those, I won't curse, it's Max's stream, but watch those guys make this sound like it's a crazed book banning. It's not. It's common sense. Why can't anybody report just on what's going on with this? I'm a bookworm. I got thousands of books in my basement. I am appalled by any forms of real book bans or book burnings. It's one of the first signs of freedom coming to an end. But that's not what's going on. There's another advantage we have and disadvantage. Legacy media has gone to crap. This sounds self-serving because I write for the Epoch Times and Western Standard, but we've got independent media outlets rising up too. We don't have to rely on the Central Canadian controlled media anymore. In fact, we shouldn't. We really must stop. They're feeding you poison. It's vile. It's biased. There's nothing worse that can happen to media. You know the only thing worse than banning media? It's buying media. When the Soviet Union and others crushed communication and tried to step on it and tried to shut it down and brought out Pravda, alternative media of its day sprung up. People met in bars. People sent pamphlets. People did things because it'll squeak through the sides. But this is more insidious because what they're doing is pouring money into the media that exists, making them subservient to the centralized government, and it gives the impression that they're giving you media and news, but it's actually the government line. It's all turning into state media. That's worse. I mean, at least, you know, I went to the Soviet Union at the end of the 80s, and the locals would roll their eyes when you mentioned Pravda because they knew Pravda for what it was, because it was the state broadcaster. It just parroted the line of the government. But now our Pravda is spread out. Our Pravda is in the Globe and Mail. Our Pravda is in CTV. It's in Global. It's Chorus Network in general. Anybody who is a talk radio listener, or used to be, listen to it these days. Do you remember how it used to be, though? Actually, it was good. It's been a long time, but it was good. I remember the 90s when you had Dave Rutherford and Dave Taylor, a great balance because you had a conservative guy and a liberal guy, and they just covered the news from each perspective that was there. And now you listen to that unlistenable pap that comes from Shay Ganem, this mushy, again, government line. But if people don't realize, why is all the media saying the same thing? Why is all of the media that used to hold governments to account, whether conservative or liberal, all parroting the government line? Because that's where they're getting their bloody paychecks. You dance with the one that brung you. And I mean, if you know that if you tick off the government, they'll cut your subsidy and you got to lay off 20 more people, you'll say, the editor's going to say, you know what, we're going to spike that story because I don't want to tick off that minister right now. And we're going to spike that story because, yeah, we don't want to stir up that issue over there. This is dangerous. And this is really bad. But again, it's flowing out of the sides as it did with the Soviet system. They're trying to control the internet and they're realizing they can't. If they could have controlled it, they would have years ago. They'd love to. They hate unfettered information. I mean, the other thing is we got more access to BS than we ever had in any time in human history as well. Part of the responsibility lands on us. Just because you saw it on the internet, we know darn well it doesn't mean it's true. But we've got other sources. We've got the Western Standard. We've got Rebel Media. We've got Candace with True North. I think she's calling it Juno now or something. It's changing, it's flexing, and there's a lot of smaller outlets springing up too. Check around, shop around, pick what seems to work for you. You can't subscribe to them all, I understand that. We have limited budgets, but pick a couple and cross-check. We can beat this. I am optimistic. I love these gatherings. I love what Chris has been doing, and Bonnie and Shane and the others working so hard, keeping this sort of thing going. Because this is what lasts. Political parties, movements, politicians, they come and go. Anger, it comes and goes. But a true movement, it begins with bonding, it begins with a culture, it begins with commonalities, and this is what keeps us from fracturing with each other, sitting together, sharing our ideas today, disagreeing but still sticking together, on the concept of freedom. So celebrate freedom, guys. We've still got some, but it's always at risk. It's one of those things that if we don't protect, someone will take it. I think it's cyclical. Eventually, it'll drop down. It might be another couple generations if we drop the ball. Let's not. But, you know, we've seen that through human history. It gets really bad, and then it crashes, and then it rises. But let's try to crash less than the others. You know, we can do this. We can do it peacefully. We can do it productively. And it's been done. Remember that when people say, this is seditious, this is wrong, this is damaging. Well, look at what used to be Czechoslovakia. Now it's Slovakia and the Czech Republic. Totally peacefully, parted ways, better for it. Way back 1905 when Alberta was founded, 120 years, we're celebrating that today, Sweden and Norway parted ways through a referendum. And they're great neighbors for it now. They're enjoying it. They have open borders. That's the other thing to remind people of. It's not a matter of hating Canada. We just want to change the agreement, change the borders. We can still be close, we can be friends, but we got to move out of each other's apartments. And in Sweden and Norway, same sort of thing. Great border crossing, economic mixture, but they are distinctly two different countries. It can be done. And without a bullet, without riots, without insanity. We've got the means, we've got the mechanism. They're fighting us right now. The fight's going to get worse before it gets better. But we're in a pivotal year. We really are. We're making history right now. So thank you all for coming out today and those tuning in. This Alberta Day, this is making history. This is making change. And this is going to last. I'm optimistic. I really am. We're heading to a better place, and we're at a great point in human history. So thank you very much, guys, and see you out there.
Who wants to watch hockey now after that anthem? Can you imagine if Edmonton wins the cup to that anthem? What do you think about that? Well, thank you everybody for being here today. My name is Jason Lavigne. I'm an independent journalist and host of the Lavigne Show. So good afternoon, good afternoon, good afternoon. We've got some fans from the show. My wife and my kids joined me. And you kind of caught me in the middle of rebuilding our studio. So when I got the text message that said, hey, you want to come and speak? Thank you, Bonnie. I said, absolutely, let's go do this. So I'm really glad to be here today and to see everybody who's showing up. A couple months ago, after the election, Danielle Smith took the stage in Bonnyville and said, look, we're going to give Carney 6 months, but what we should be doing is having conversations. And I thought, you know what? She's not wrong. We need to have conversations. This whole independent movement, sovereignty movement, separation, whatever you want to call it, let's just call it change or self-determination. The biggest challenge that we have right now is going to be information and changing the hearts and minds of people with the truth. So when we're up against things like the mainstream media, who's trying to scare people, trying to rally Canada against Alberta, and trying to make sure that we're not independent, we need to work harder, twice as hard, to go ahead and get that information out there. So what my family and I did is we picked up the boys, put them in the back of the car, and drove out east to start having conversations. We call it the Alberta Self-Determination Series. We're interviewing 50 people, including Danielle Smith herself, to have these conversations. We started out east in Quebec. Why Quebec? Because in 1980, 1995, they stood up and said, hey, look, we want to ask the question, should we stay in Canada? So there was a lot of lessons for us to learn from Quebec and what they were doing. Good, bad, ugly, everything in between. And heck, I thought we should go there and see some of our money at work, hanging out in Quebec for a little bit there, seeing how we send $12 to $15 billion a year there. At least you would think the roads would be great, but they're not. But we started the conversations out east, worked our way through Ontario, Tom Marazzo, Randy Hilliard, Donald Best, Bruce Party, many others, and made ourselves west. So you'll have Nadine Ness in Saskatchewan. We interviewed her, and then we started in Alberta. What I can tell you, the heartbeat in Alberta is being felt across Canada. They all understand now why we are frustrated, upset, and having these conversations about change, self-determination. They don't teach this in school, that starting in 1905, 120 years ago today, Alberta was kind of brought into Canada. It wasn't a vote. We didn't sit down and say, let's do it. We were brought into Canada through a purchase and through legislation. And ever since then, Alberta has been growing stronger, more independent, and very, very different from the rest of Canada. When Alberta became rich and prosperous, the East had this motto, screw the West, take the rest. Did you hear that one? Screw the West, take the rest. Why? Because we are prosperous, we are people who want to help, and they saw how much we were doing. And they were worried that if we did too much on our own, we would realize we don't need to be part of Canada. Trudeau Sr., 1980, he ran on a platform about this. Screw the West, take the rest. But then Preston Manning came along, and he said, you know what? Let's try something. The West wants in. Let's go ahead and see if the East wants us there. So if you talk to Dr. Wagner, he'll tell you that that was a great experiment, and it was successful. Not successful in the way that we wanted to be brought in, but that we got our answer. The East doesn't want us in. So when we decided to make these conversations and bring them to you, this was the whole point. 50 conversations, 50 different people, 50 different perspectives, so that you can get a piece of that whole puzzle and put it together. I highly recommend you check out the series. We're on number 9 right now. We recorded 25. Drew Barnes was the last one we recorded in Medicine Hat. And we are going to meet with Preston Manning, Danielle Smith. We already did Stockwell Day. So there's a lot of conversations there from different perspectives and leaders from Alberta and across the country. Highly recommend you check out the Vincent Gersey episode, because that's about policing on a provincial level or a new nation level. He's an Ontario provincial police officer for 34 years, and he says if you really want sovereignty, you should not have the RCMP controlling your police. Another episode I think you should really check out, because of the misinformation. We really should control our own police. The misinformation out there from the mainstream media is, well, you're a landlocked country, you're going to get militarily destroyed, and what are you going to do then? You can't afford your own military. Well, Tom Marazzo, 25-year veteran from the military, sat down with me. This episode came out a few days ago. He explained to us, we already have our bases. We already have our protection. And we have a fantastic neighbor, strategically, who would love to team up with us to make sure that the defense of Alberta is strong. So check that one out as well, because the U.S. definitely has some interest here. And as we continue these conversations, I encourage you to share them out, learn a little piece of that 50-person puzzle, and see the bigger picture. Because it's clear as day that we absolutely need to have change. Whether it's sovereignty within Canada, is what Danielle Smith says, independence, which is what most people say, or even taking a look at the 51st state, which some people have said, like Lawrence Solomon. Now, what I also want to share with you is my wife and I, sitting right over there with my 2 little boys, we do, thank you guys, she's mine, stay away. We do a morning show as well, 7 a.m. bright and early live, where we have continuous conversations about what's going on. And tomorrow we have the good friend Cory Morgan joining us as we have a conversation about media, some of the misinformation out there, and how we fight back as independent media. So make sure you tune into that one. And the last thing I want to talk to you about is getting the truth out there through our series that we call The Untold Story. So yesterday we released the untold story of Chris Shoemaker, Dr. Chris Shoemaker, who let us know that way before COVID was even around, things like lipid nanoparticles were being tested and proved to be poisonous. There was no market for it, and then suddenly it was being used. That ivermectin was definitely a product that was safe for various things, including scabies for children's hair. But yet they went through this program through the colleges to go ahead and make sure that people were threatened not to use it. So if you're looking for truth and information and you don't want to go to the mainstream media anymore, check out independent journalists. Check out Max. Max is definitely streaming all the good conversations. Cory Morgan from the Western Standard, myself, and many others. Because this is how we're going to win this particular battle, and then the war, is information. And if we don't share this out, make sure that we know what we're talking about so we can share with our friends when it comes to policing, military, pension plan, various things about the Constitution. Should we copy one, create a new one? Look for Bruce Party's episode coming on Tuesday about that one. He has a great idea about the Bill of Rights. He says we shouldn't try and create another Bill of Rights where it's a Bill of Rights for the people. We should create a Bill of Rights for the government. The rights that the government has, keep them very limited, keep them very small, and very restricted. because we're born with our human rights. We don't have to write those down. So I would highly encourage you to check out that episode coming out on Tuesday. And I'd love to hang out with you a lot more, but I got 2 hungry kids and a studio to put together before Cory joins us tomorrow morning. So I'm just a warm-up for Jason over here. He came all the way to hang out with you guys and speak a little bit more, and it looks like the wind has just picked up as well. So I thank you very much for all of you that stayed for the last 3 days, the ones that showed up just for the afternoon, and the ones that came to hear some speakers. I really appreciate it. I love you all very much, and God bless.
I actually think this is really wonderful weather, actually. It's not too hot, and it's a beautiful, cool breeze. I'm really thankful for the opportunity to be here today. When I was asked to come and speak, I gladly accepted. It's Alberta Day. Alberta is a place that we all love. What a special place. What a blessed place Alberta is. And I loved hearing that song about the place that we love, that is a place of freedom and prosperity and a place of hope for so many great individuals. I'm just going to share with you a message. I've modified it slightly, but last year at Alberta Day, I sometimes like writing articles. And last year at Alberta Day, I wrote this article titled, Alberta, the Best Province in a Nation in Trouble. And I'm just going to read a little bit from it because it applies today. September 1 is Alberta Day. And of course, it's 120 years now since Alberta became part of Canada. Alberta is a land of freedom and prosperity, welcoming all who desire to work and to serve, seeking happiness for themselves and their families. So we've been part of Canada for 120 years. And historically, Alberta has led Canada in many key measures, such as GDP per capita, business investment per worker, private sector employment, CPP contributions, equalization payments per capita, and the list goes on and on. Alberta is the best. But here's something that not many people like to admit, and that is Canada has benefited more from Alberta than Alberta has benefited from Canada. You know, that's a difficult truth to sometimes admit and acknowledge. The Fraser Institute did a study, and it was titled Understanding Alberta's Outsized Contribution to Confederation. And it estimated that Alberta businesses and workers between 2017 to 2023 paid more than $244 billion to Ottawa, more than we received back from Ottawa. And it dwarfed the net contributions of only other 2 contributing provinces, Ontario and BC. But despite Ontario having a much larger population, our net contribution dwarfed those. And our Premier has estimated that, generally speaking, we contribute about $25 billion more to Canada than we get back from Canada every year. And of course, as we all know, the biggest taker during this period has been Quebec. And I will just say that one thing that the current Premier of Quebec said, he was asked during an election campaign what his favorite thing about Canada was. Do you know what he said? His favorite thing about Canada was equalization. It's pretty pathetic, actually. That's what the Premier of Quebec said his favorite thing about Canada is. You know, that's not very good. So Canada has the potential to be the most free and prosperous country in the world. But by objective measures, it is not. And the flawed structure of confederation, and some who seek to exploit and glut themselves on the labor of others, will hold us back and drag us down. And when the redistribution of wealth displaces the production of wealth as a ruling principle, you know that you're in trouble. And that is now. Many are concerned that this progressive Canada is a growing danger and threat to Alberta's freedom and prosperity. And it is true. Progressive Canada is a fiscal train wreck. Before I became an MLA, I was a chartered accountant. I was a tax lawyer, helping business owners pay as little tax as possible, but legally to do so within the law. And I've always been interested in fiscal responsibility and discipline. And Trudeau, when he was in as Prime Minister, during his rule, he accumulated more to our national debt than all of the Prime Ministers before him combined. You know, that's just a stunning statistic. That just that one Prime Minister, he was so bad, they added more to the national debt than all of the Prime Ministers before him combined. That's just a horrible, damning statistic, actually. And unfortunately, under our new Prime Minister, that trajectory has not changed. And that's also very disappointing. So, you know, this gross negligence, waste, and disrespect will be burdens to our children. And I'm a father of 3, and I'm kind of saddened that some of the opportunities that I enjoyed as a young adult, it's harder for some of our young adults. And unfortunately, government has played a role in that. It's a little bit windy. Okay, I just want to talk about something that's a little bit new. I'm going to deviate from my the paper that I wrote a year ago, because one really exciting thing that wasn't around then but is now, and that is that citizens of Alberta have an opportunity to have referendums. I really love checks and balances on government. It's very important. I recently wrote an article about Alberta does not need a king. You know, the rule should belong to the people. They are the rulers, and political leaders should be the servants. But we don't need a de facto king either. And unfortunately, in Ottawa, in between elections, we do have a de facto king. But we have the ability to have a referendum. And I remember when we brought out the Citizens Initiative Act, when Jason Kenney brought it in. And unfortunately, back then, it was a fake law. It was a fake law because the thresholds were impossible, virtually impossible to ever have. And so on paper, the Premier was able to say, look, we have this Citizens Initiative Act, but actually you couldn't because the thresholds were impossible to meet. And so I really appreciate and respect that now Albertans, that under Premier Danielle Smith, we have thresholds that are difficult to meet. It's not an easy thing to have a referendum, but it is possible. And I love Alberta being able to have a referendum. And in particular, I want there to be a referendum on independence. I really do. I think there's so much value in having the public participate in the public debate and just informing themselves on where Canada is and how Alberta is treated within Canada. I just really want to have that discussion. and respect the will of whatever Albertans say. But I just love Albertans having the opportunity to inform themselves with the truth and act accordingly. I just think that is such a beautiful, wonderful thing. So I have hope in that. And I do have hope in the truth. I'm a person of faith. The truth will always prevail. And we can trust in truth unconditionally. Isn't it wonderful? We don't have to trust in man or a man king. We can trust in truth. And we can always trust in it without reservation and have faith in it. And I want Albertans to have the truth. I want them to see things as they really are and act accordingly. Now, unfortunately, we've seen that. Unfortunately, some people don't want there to be a referendum on independence. And that's really sad, that they're afraid of Albertans or they don't trust them with making their choices. And there's a lot of fear-mongering and lying. And unfortunately, that's very sad. It destroys trust and it creates contention. The truth brings about peace. And so that's a wonderful thing. So let's arm Albertans with more truth and then trust them to lead, to know what is best. Let's increase Alberta's leverage for a fair deal. And this is something as well. The less Alberta needs Canada, the more leverage Alberta has. And that's a great thing. It's great to be more independent. As a conservative, individuals who maybe are homeless or struggling, we want to love and support them to have towards recovery and towards greater self-reliance. And as we arm people with the truth, it does help us to be more free. So Albertans need alternatives to a progressive Canada. There are some storm clouds on the horizon, and as a father and as a member of our community, I am concerned about that. And I think all of you here as well, coming out here, you love Alberta, but you probably have some concerns as well. It's important to prepare. As we prepare, there's safety in being more prepared. Insulate and protect ourselves from an accelerating train wreck, which unabated will crash as surely as night follows day. We cannot be complacent. Alberta is a blessed land, a land of freedom and prosperity, and we must be vigilant to keep it that way. And I want to wish each and every one of you a very, very happy Alberta Day. And isn't it wonderful to be here at the Whistle Stop together, celebrating the great blessing to live in the best province in Canada. Thank you.
Good morning to everybody, and thank you for making it out here on this beautiful Alberta day indeed. The sun is shining. We can see the blue sky starting to peek out as the mist and the dew is beginning to melt off. And even on my way out, it was really foggy. And just a real reminder that sometimes we don't always know where we're going, but that doesn't mean the road ahead of us doesn't exist and it's not there. And in some ways, that can be what this journey to our independence as our own nation can look like. That we're on this road and it can be foggy and we maybe don't know where all the bends and the turns are, but the road is still there to follow. And as you heard, I have been involved in this space, in the Alberta independence space for the last 6 years. I've always been, I guess, quote unquote separatist, as they like to call us, for a long time. I just didn't know what to do with that. And then the opportunity arose in 2019 to get involved with Wexit, and so I did. And then from there, I ended up through a whole bunch of different iterations and things that took place and decisions that were made. I ended up being part of the Wild Rose Independence Party, and then that all came crashing down and fell apart. And while I was in the midst of all of this, I learned a lot, not just about politics, but about the forces around politics. And when we see these independence groups begin to fall apart and people blame egos, I learned that that's only half right. Yes, it's egos, But what actually happens is it's the people on the outside, and it's global, that don't want to see us become our own nation. They come in and they find the low-hanging fruit within those groups, who they can manipulate, who they can make promises to, and then they use those people to collapse it from the inside rather than from the outside. So it looks like it's a bunch of infighting. And that was fascinating to me, which caused me to think that, you know what, maybe as we move forward with this whole independence thing, all of us being under one banner is a terrible idea. We need several groups to be doing this. We need all the voices out there, that we're all working together. We're all friends. We all talk. But we're not all together under one banner, because then it makes it harder to pull us down. And it seems like everybody in this movement has figured that out. And it's been great. It's been wonderful. And we've seen growth that we've never seen before. I can't believe we're polling, depending who you're listening to, but anywhere between 30 and 45%. That's unheard of. We never reached those numbers. And that's because the people figured out and decided that this is a movement of the people, not a movement of the politicians. And we were just talking this morning over coffee before we started about the politics that surround this. And it really does need to be a movement of the people, a literal for the people and by the people. Leave the politicians out of it for the first little while until it's their time to come in and finish the job. But in the meantime, it's up to us. And earlier this year, I was at a Rebel News event in Red Deer. It was very good, actually. They had a lot of really great speakers on exactly this subject. And they were selling these T-shirts that say ungovernable. And I knew I had to have one, so I bought one. And it's because many of us Albertans, that's how we're perceived by the rest of Canada. We're perceived as ungovernable. And the more I thought about it, the more I decided that was probably a compliment, to be perceived as ungovernable, because what they don't seem to understand is that being ungovernable is not synonymous with anarchy. Rules and boundaries have their place. And we believe that as Albertans. For example, if someone wants to come into my house without my permission, they've broken a rule, they've crossed a boundary, it is not going to end well for them. That's just a simple example. But there's bigger ones that we're seeing in our province that are completely problematic. Government flags used to be the only flags that could fly on government buildings. They served as a symbol as to who was running the show, who was in charge. But that's not the case anymore. And that's a problem when special interest groups get to come in and fly their flags on our government buildings. That's not the place. They've broken the rules and they've crossed a boundary. Or how about the rules for me, but not for me, or not for the garbage that goes on? We're supposed to watch our carbon footprints while politicians fly all over the globe compliments of our tax dollars. Some people we've been watching are penalized for peacefully protesting, still penalized greatly, while others are allowed to protest without any rules or boundaries at all. It's not right. It's not right. And this is the trajectory that this country is going on, is not a trajectory that matches with who Albertans are. So make no wonder the majority of us really don't want to get involved in politics. There's no way to know what you're getting involved in when the rules and the boundaries continue to change. Nevertheless, I couldn't help myself. So 6 years ago, I did. I jumped in. As I said, I've learned a lot about politics, and in the process, I learned a ton about our province's history that I don't recall learning in school. And I've been spending the last several months traveling the province, teaching this to other people, sharing with them what I've learned. And probably the first shock that I had was that our provinces and Saskatchewan were the only two provinces that did not negotiate our way into confederation. We were literally colonized. And here's the story in a nutshell. Prior to 1905, we were being advertised as the last best west. This was the land of milk and honey. It was the place to be, to go, to start new, to start fresh. Anything and everything you could ever want to accomplish, you could do it here. And people answered that call, and they came. They came predominantly from the U.S., but also from Europe and other parts of the world to set up shop, to do the things that they always dreamed of doing, in many cases to get away from some of the oppression that they were under, particularly those that left Europe. But when they got here, they realized pretty quickly that it's hard to follow the rules and the boundaries that they were given when your closest political representative is all the way in Regina and email and texting hasn't been invented yet. So the lawyers and businessmen of the day, they got together and they came up with this idea of beginning to create the province of Buffalo. Instead of this great big province of the Northwest Territories, which is what we were at that time, Alberta and Saskatchewan were territories in this province of the Northwest Territories. They said, let's just take those two territories and create the province of Buffalo. So they went to Haultain with this idea, who was the premier at the time, and actually was a very good premier. And he said, you know what, that's not a bad idea. Let me take that back. So he did. He took that back. He went to Ottawa with it. And of course, Ottawa is where all great ideas go to die. And that's exactly what happened. Ottawa said, no, absolutely not. You will not be creating the province of Buffalo. We've got different ideas. And they took a pencil, an eraser, and a ruler, and they created the provinces of Alberta and Saskatchewan. There were no negotiations. There were no rules of engagements. We did not get to decide where the boundaries were going to be. We were told this is how it's going to be, and these are the rules that you are now going to live under. And that's how Alberta became a province. For people who go, well, okay, whatever, fine, we're here now, everything is good. The other part of this that most don't understand or know is that there was a federal politician in 1904, as all of these conversations were taking place, who said this, and I quote, "We desire, every patriotic Canadian desires, that the great trade of the prairie goes to enrich our own people in the East, to build up the factories and workshops in Eastern Canada and contribute in every way to its prosperity." Elbows Up has been here for a very long time. It's not a new concept. Fast forward decades later to today, in 2025, we pay $23 billion more per year in equalization than we get back, all to support the eastern provinces. In 20 years, it's added up now to a net loss for us. Very much under a monarchist style of government. It's top down. That's how it's designed. And most people have no idea that even right now, laws are being passed to censor us further, continue to control our purchases, choke out our industries, and mess around with our lives all the way around. The fancy terminology for it is called managed decline, and it's happening among all the Western nations, just about. There's one small exception down south for now. Now again, when Alberta was confederated, obviously we were not given the ability to negotiate any kind of opt-out or escape clause at the time. But we do have one today, oddly, thanks to Quebec. It's called the Clarity Act. But to get there, we're going to have to push some boundaries. The first of which are some comfort zones. It's a bit of an unknown. Like the road this morning that I was on that was all foggy and I couldn't see all the way down, but I knew the road was there. I had to push the boundaries through that fog to get here, which also meant I had to get past my comfort zones and know that my car was going to get here despite all of that. And belief systems. We've got to believe that we can do this. We've also got to believe what's true, and we've got to be able to recognize what's false. There are a lot of people who want us to think that we can't do this. And nothing could be further from the truth. I also think we need to push the boundaries and our belief systems of what the future will hold if we don't do something versus if we do. Because everything right now is pointing to us looking like the next Venezuela if we just choose to sit here and stick with the status quo. It's very challenging to admit that the freedoms we think and believe we have are actually a joke. As we saw just a few short years ago, they can all be taken away at a moment's notice with just the right of a pen. And that's not good. That's not who Albertans are. It's not what we're about. And because of all of this, it's causing us, some of us, to be a little more ungovernable than normal and explore our options. Next year, we're going to have a referendum on Alberta's independence from Confederation. And I've been traveling around all over the place, encouraging people to do some digging about this. Figure it out and find out for yourselves. Don't just take my word for it. By all means, please fact check all the information that's out there, because you could get lost for days and weeks now with all of the podcasts and the articles on this topic. There's no reason to say, well, I didn't know, when it's all there. And once you've done that digging for yourself, and you've come to your own conclusions, and you've talked to your neighbors and your colleagues and your friends and your family about it, you can decide if you agree with me that we do need to get out there on referendum day and vote yes. And it's important to get out there on referendum day and vote, because simply agreeing but staying home doesn't make the change. For those who don't typically go out during election times, that's another boundary that you're going to have to cross. You got to get out of that comfort zone, and you've got to get out of that belief system that your vote doesn't count. It absolutely does count. And if you agree that we need to get out of here and we need that referendum, get out and vote yes when it comes time. There's also those around us who think we can still negotiate a deal with Ottawa somehow. I don't really know how they think that, but they do. These are the eternal optimists. Those eternal optimists also need to get out there and vote yes on that referendum, because the only way you're going to open up that Constitution is through that referendum on our independence. There will still be those who are among us and believe that everything's fine. They've got the rose-colored glasses on. We're seeing them saying yes to this other petition that Thomas Lukaszuk has going on. And okay, I can respect that, so long as they've done their homework. I won't understand it, but I can definitely respect it. On the topic of voting, if you have never voted before, municipal elections are coming up in October. People think that municipalities, it doesn't really matter. It's such a small government, who cares? And they've been allowed to go unchallenged for way too long. Way too long. And we're starting to see the mess of that. This is the level of government that governs your backyard. Literally. Literally. These are the ones who spend gobs of money on stupid stuff like bike lanes in Edmonton and infill in both Edmonton and Calgary. These are the guys that in the rural communities, they decide how many chickens, pigs, and goats you can have. They also decide what you can and cannot build on your property. So if you've never voted before, this municipal election is an excellent opportunity to get out there and find out who your candidates are and what it is like to participate in that democratic process of choosing who you want representing you at the municipal level. Going back to property, what you can and cannot build. Did you know that in Confederation, under our current system of government, we don't have property rights? Not even in Alberta. And to prove that, try and build anything on your property, or do something with it that isn't just mowing the lawn. You're going to need a permit. You need to be permitted to. You need to be given permission for almost everything. As a Republic of Alberta, we could enshrine property rights in our Constitution. And it wouldn't matter what the rest of Canada wants to do, because we're not governed under the rest of Canada anymore. We're governing ourselves. Let's explore that a little further. As the Republic of Alberta, we would no longer be under the Canada Health Act. There's a lot of conversation about our healthcare system right now, how good or how bad, or some people are indifferent, but it's always in the news. And they always say, oh, well, it's provincial, it's provincial. Well, not really. We're still governed under the Canada Health Act, which prevents us from being able to have the healthcare system that we should have, deserve to have, and have the capabilities to have. As a Republic of Alberta, we would no longer be under that, and we could have the best healthcare in the world. In fact, we could even be a destination station for healthcare. We've got the bright minds, we've got the resources to make that happen. We're also hearing a lot in the news about policing, having our own provincial police force. And it makes me laugh that it's typically the people in the cities that are screeching about getting rid of the RCMP when they already have their own police force. So I'm not sure why they think they get an opinion. I don't think they should. But having our own police force, would make such a difference. Imagine having somebody come and actually be able to make sure that the law was being followed. What a concept. Rather than catch and release and just letting people go. Imagine having a police force that shows up within minutes of something bad happening to you, rather than you being told, well, it'll probably be 30 minutes if you're living in the rural neighborhoods, in the rural communities. That's because we live in a confederation that does not allow us to have a proper police force. We could create that. We'd also be in control of our own borders and immigration. That's a huge thing right now. Huge thing. A lot of people, shockingly, haven't put together yet that the high unemployment rate among our youth directly corresponds and correlates with the amount of immigration that has come into our province. I'm not blaming the immigrants, but I will blame the government for bringing them here. We could be in control of that. People ask about, well, what about social programs under Republic of Alberta? Well, what about them? We pay for them now, nothing changes. Pensions. Lots of conversation about pensions these days, particularly an Alberta pension plan, and some screeching and freaking out. Most times that's because people don't understand how your CPP works right now. It's a formula. It has nothing to do with how the fund has performed. It's just simply a formula of how much you put in versus how much you're going to get out at the end. If we had our own pension, we could have an Alberta pension that follows something that makes sense, like you would receive the growth back that your pension dollars created. Why couldn't you? And furthermore, if there's any money left in there when you die, your beneficiaries could get it. That's not how it goes right now. We could right that wrong by becoming our own nation and take care of our seniors instead of them being in a panic right now, the way that they are. Which is, well, quite frankly, that's just evil, actually, to cause our seniors to be in such a disarray like that, as if we're going to leave them behind. That's ridiculous. The other thing that we could do that's part of the social fabric that we're used to now that we wouldn't have to give up is unemployment insurance. Call it what it is. First of all, it's unemployment insurance that you need when you're unemployed. How many Albertans have contributed to that all of their working lives and never ever received a dime back? It just goes to somebody else or into the ether or wherever. Why can't that money be tacked on to your pension at the end if you never used it? It's yours. That's another wrong that we could make right. Taxes. We are so overtaxed that actually over half of what we make goes to some level of government somewhere. Over half. That's theft. We could right that wrong by becoming a Republic of Alberta and being under a small government, finally, and have the lowest business and personal taxes in the Western world. Those numbers have been crunched and shown that that is possible. People come at me, Kathy, we're landlocked. Yeah, but everything that comes through Vancouver, not everything, but almost everything that comes through Vancouver comes through Alberta. Pretty sure they're going to want to play nice in the sandbox if they want all those goods to continue coming through our highways. Not to mention, it's our resources that fuel that port for the most part. So without us, they won't have a port. What dollar would we use? I don't know. Probably the American one at first, because the Canadian dollar is going to tank immediately. But maybe we'll get our own eventually once we get our feet under us. The fact is, and the truth is, that once we push these boundaries and our belief systems and we decide that we're ready to live under our own rules, the possibilities and a hope for a future are endless. As it is now, it isn't. It never will be. So it's time to make a change. It's time to look at what we have to do to help us get to where we want to be. And strangely enough, everything we need is already here. The most obvious thing that we're going to need are natural resources. Farming and agriculture. It's the quintessential picture of Alberta. You see pump jacks and everything to do with the oil field in the fields with the combines and the cows in the pasture beside. We've got manufacturing here. Lithium to mine, in fact. Data centers are on the way, which is pretty cool, actually, when you go down that rabbit hole. Hunting season, Now upon us, fishing is a favorite for many, no matter the weather. With so much to see and do, it's not hard to believe we have a thriving tourism industry, and it isn't just mountains and skiing. Much of it showcases our history, everything from dinosaur bones to farm museums to Leduc 1. Speaking of history, we have an incredibly rich history of entrepreneurship, working hard, playing hard, helping our neighbor even if we don't really like them that day. That's what built this province. That's who we are. And for those in Quebec, that's our culture. We are Albertans, and we stand together, and we help one another, and we help each other build. We don't need maple syrup and poutine to do it. We have everything to be completely self-sufficient, including the greatest resource of all, which is us. We have the people who have the chutzpah to do this, which is exactly why Ottawa is already lawyering up. And they are. Now, unfortunately, just like with the COVID mandates, the go-along to get-along crowd are going to need some trailblazers. Albertans who are willing to challenge the status quo. And this is one of those times in history where those who lean toward being ungovernable are needed most. Those of us who follow the rules so long as they abide by the live and let live mantra. But if they don't, we have no problem pushing boundaries to do something about it. Alberta independence is likely to be a long road, but as the old proverb goes, every journey begins with a step. In our case, that step is getting that referendum on independence passed next year. And I believe it will, so long as we all show up. And then the real work begins. And with the Alberta spirit that we have always been known for, we are going to get her done. And the ungovernable, we're going to govern ourselves. Thank you.
Carrie Lambert, so the Chris and Carrie show. She's kind of in charge of Carrie.
I don't know how in charge I am of that guy, but he's definitely a big, special part of my life. So we've talked a lot about the benefits of independence. We've talked about the process a lot, I've heard here today. And we've talked a lot about the whys. So again, my name is Vicky Bayford. I'm the past leader of the Independence Party. And I'm now a regular volunteer for the Alberta Prosperity Project for the past 2 years. And one thing that I've learned since I've gotten involved, back probably in 2020 I got involved with the Independence Party. And one thing that I've learned is that the system really is corrupt, and it really, really needs to be fixed. And it doesn't matter what level of government we're talking about. And this is our solution. But I never really come up here and talk about a lot about where I came from and how I kind of got to where I'm at. So I kind of thought today I would tell you a little bit of a story about myself and tell you, how I got to where I'm at as far as my decision on Alberta independence. So I am a 5th and 6th generation Albertan, depending on the side that you look at of my family. I was born in Fort McMurray, but was raised in Calgary. And then a few years ago decided Calgary was too much for me again, and I moved to Innisfail. So now I'm in central Alberta. So I have lived pretty much across this province at one time in my life, or not. But I was born to a middle class, good old Canadian family, good old Albertan family. And my parents split up when I was about 10. And my parents were very different people. Obviously, that's probably why they didn't make it. But very lovely people, all on their own. But very different viewpoints in life and the way they wanted to do things. My dad was much more about you work hard, and you work hard, and he believed in tough love, and he did not believe in can't. Actually, that was one of the things he used to always try to do, his really bad Yoda voice and say there's only do, there is no do not. That was always his famous line. to us when we were kids. We weren't allowed to say the word can't. It was worse than saying the F word in front of him. So, as I grew up, in a broken home, I wasn't the best child. And I've definitely made my share of mistakes through my life. And some people might say when I had my first son, that was one of them, and that was actually probably not. That was probably the thing that put me back on the path of trying to get my life together. But I became a mom at 15. And thank goodness I did have the parents I had, because I was super blessed to have the support and the love from them, as much as they were a little upset when they found out their 15-year-old was pregnant. But they did let me do it on my own as best as I could with their support. And sorry, I'm going to try not to get too emotional here. But I can tell you that through all of the adversity that I've gone through in my life, I can tell you that every one of those hurdles that I had to jump made me stronger. I was never much of a really good rule follower, especially if it didn't make sense to me. And, sometimes it worked out for me, and sometimes it didn't. But every single one of those, like I said, hurdles that I had to go through made me stronger. I had to be a have-not for a really long, long time in my younger years, from 15 to, let's say, 19, when I decided to finally get my crap together, go back to school, and start working hard to make what I wanted my life to be. I didn't want to be stuck. I would go to these mom and tot groups as a 15-year-old with other teenage moms, and you would see what I will say what people would envision as a teenage mom. We'd have this group of teenage moms that would get together. We had these mom and tot groups, and most of them were on social services. Most of them were having 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 kids before they were 20 years old. There was a couple of them actually in that group. And they had no goals and no aspirations to get by, because they didn't have to, because they had a system that was going to keep them comfortable enough to live in poverty. They were comfortable in their poverty, and it made me sad, because I was like, I looked at that, and I was only probably 16 at the time, going, this is not what I want my life to be. And it still took me a couple more years to get my crap together. I mean, I was working the whole time and struggling at, $4.75 an hour and paying my bills. But I could. Guess what? I could actually make it on $4.75 an hour. It wasn't fun, and it wasn't like there wasn't struggles with that, but I could actually do it on my own at $4.75 an hour. And that was only 30 years ago. So anyway, I decided at 19, I'm going to go back to school. I'm going to get my high school. I'm going to finish my high school. I'm going to go to college. So I went to business college, and I got a certificate, and found out that wasn't really, even though I paid a lot of money for it, that paper really wasn't worth a whole lot, because it didn't come from an accredited institution like Mount Royal or whatever. And I got this accounting certificate, and I thought, well, now I'm still working in a convenience store for $7 an hour now. And can't get a job because I don't have experience. Can't get an experience because can't get a job. I kind of went through that for about a year. Finally got an opportunity with a property management company as an administrator in operations. Was there for about 3 years. And was laid off with a group of other people. And wasn't really sure. I was actually pretty terrified when I got laid off from that first office job, because I thought, man, this took me a long time to get to this spot, and I thought I'm going to end up back in the service industry, go back to minimum wage. I was terrified, but didn't realize that 3 years that I worked gave me the experience I needed to overcome that next hurdle. I had a job within 5 days working for a drilling company as a receptionist. And then through that, I worked for drilling companies into the accounting side, accounts payable, accounts receivable, whatever they wanted me to do. I worked for drilling companies for about 7 years and learned. I can tell you everything about a drilling rig you ever need to know. I used to love doing drilling tours for the executives. It was fun. And I loved working with those guys that I worked with every day and talked to, those rig managers. They were awesome. Anyway, I moved on from that. One of the guys I worked with that was in sales said his buddy needed a drilling secretary. And I was like, well, what do they do? He goes, I don't know, but you'll probably be good at it. And I was like, okay. So then I moved into operations. And now I do a lot of rep. For the last 25 years, I've been doing operation. On the operation side, I've been doing a lot of the regulatory and working as kind of the intermediate between the production engineers and our drilling teams and our completion teams, and making sure that they stay on track with all the things that they need to do to make sure that we can continue our operations. And the reason I wanted to tell you guys this story is because it wasn't easy, but I had the opportunity because I wanted to put in the effort. And a lot of people are afraid of abandoning Canada because of the people that are have-nots in this province and around this and around the rest of this country. People are afraid for the have-nots. But those have-nots will not change, and those have-nots will not do anything until they have to, until they're so uncomfortable, and until they can see a brighter future and see the opportunity. That's not going to change. And Alberta holds those have-not provinces to status quo. We are not only, through Alberta independence, going to uplift our own lives, we are going to uplift the lives of the rest of Canada, because they're going to have no choice. Just think about that. When people tell you that we're going to hurt other people, we are not. We're going to put them in a place where they can make a choice. And I'm going to bring this around again because I want people to have choice. I love and value my freedom. I value my faith, I value my family, and I value my freedom. Those are the three most important things. Money, it's just a tool of exchange that we use to get by. And obviously we need it, but it's just a tool. But our faith, our family, and our freedom are the three things that hold us together and continue to make society the most prosperous. Because if we don't have those three things, you can have all the money in the world and it's not going to make your life happy or fulfilled. So right now we have to start talking about truth. And I think a lot of speakers have come up here today and spoke a lot about, the truth. But we also have to look at things. This is where I'm probably going to tick a lot of people off. But we have to look at the truth at all levels of our government, even governments that we support. We have had the UN Agenda, which started as UN Agenda 2021, coming down since 2021. And then it got changed to Agenda 2030. And the governments have slowly been creating policy to implement this slowly right under our noses. And most of us weren't aware. I know I wasn't. I saw the changes in the schooling. I saw the changes in curriculum when my kids were in school. But it was like, well, they know better than I do. I'm not a teacher, right? Like we were trusting our institutions. And I don't think there was anything wrong with doing that, because I think there was a point in time where we could. We just didn't know better, that we should not and should start questioning things. And we didn't know what we didn't know. But now we know a lot. And we have to start holding these systems and these politicians accountable. We can't sit there and make excuses for politicians when they're putting things in place that are going to hurt us. We have, at every level of government, changes. Our municipalities are restricting our land rights. Our provincial government is now putting into place and the infrastructure for net zero and digital ID. Just as of Friday, our own premier has told us they've spent a ton of money to create an app for us that's voluntary. She's saying it. All of this stuff with a smile on their face. They're telling us how convenient this is going to be for us, how much it's going to improve our lives. It's only safe until it's not. You know, it was only a few years ago, Jason Kenney told us he didn't even know what a vaccine passport was. And the very next week implemented it. And just because our politicians are saying it with a smile on their face and saying that it's voluntary doesn't make it safe. We have to start talking about these things and calling them out loud. We are having waste. You know, like I do have a lot of friends that probably swing on the left side of the political spectrum, people I work with. And I don't obviously agree with them on a lot of their standpoints, but there's some things they're absolutely correct on. Our education system is a mess. Our healthcare system's a mess. And really, there's been no substantial changes to help those frontline workers. I'm not talking about the bureaucracy. The bureaucracy definitely needs to be fixed, but we still really haven't seen any real effective change to that bureaucracy. If anything, Danielle Smith has made the bureaucracy 23,000 employees bigger since she got into power, more so than the NDP ever did. We have to pay attention to these things. And I know, like I said, I know lots of people here support Danielle Smith, and I'm not saying not to. But we have to call every politician out. I don't care what political party they're part of. And make sure that we're in charge and not them. We are having delay after delay, obviously, with this petition. I don't know where that's coming from. And I'm not going to speculate. We just know that this is what it is. There might come a time where we just do the petition. I don't know. But we need our numbers to be strong. And we do need this to remain peaceful. But not peaceful in the sense that we back off. Peaceful in the sense that we are assertive and we move forward regardless towards Alberta independence. But truth is all that really matters, and we do have to face what is actually happening right now. And I know most of the people here, I'm probably preaching to the choir, and they're very much aware. But there's probably things that you're not aware of because they happen on a Friday before the long weekend. The legislation gets passed and talked about when we're busy raising our kids and raising our grandkids and just trying to keep our heads above water, to be honest. You know, we go to a lot of these APP meetings, and one of the biggest things we always hear is, where's all the young people? They're raising their kids. They're taking their kids to sports. They're working 2 jobs. That's where they are. So, you know, getting that demographic to a meeting isn't going to happen, like not in big droves. So it is up to us as the parents and the grandparents to spread that education to our children. It's up to us, nobody else. You know, I talk to my boys pretty regularly, and I know sometimes it doesn't even have to be a difficult conversation. You know, our kids, or adult kids, you know, they'll come up to us and start complaining about, you know, how expensive groceries are and this and that. It opens up the door. Use those small opportunities just to plant seeds and let them know that there is a solution to this. That's all it is one conversation at a time. And then they'll talk to their friends. If you are a teacher, if you are in a place where you're in the public and you're regularly in front of, you know, I mean, I'm not saying at your workplace because I know sometimes that's a little harder. But I'm just saying when you're part of community groups, especially in volunteer associations, you get access to a lot of other groups and demographics that you wouldn't normally. And it's a really good opportunity just to start talking about the solutions. I'm not saying scare the crap out of our kids and make them feel hopeless. We actually want to do the opposite. We want to give them hope So let's feed them with some solutions, things that they can do on a day-to-day basis, even if it's as simple as making a phone call or writing a letter, because they need to be aware. And we can't stop hiding the truth, and we can't stop defending people that are doing things that don't support us. In the UN SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, there's 17 of them. And they all relate directly back to the to the Communist Manifesto. You can relate almost every single one of those. And they say that socialism is a bridge to communism, or it bridges communism and capitalism. It doesn't bridge communism and capitalism. It takes us straight on a path to communism. The infrastructure's there now, folks. It's there. Digital ID, net zero, climate change fear, all of these things that are in the DEI. It's still in our school. SOGI's still there. That hasn't been removed. And that's a provincial jurisdiction. She's taken some books out of the school, so that's great. I'm glad that young kids can't see pornography anymore, and kudos to Daniel Smith for making that change. I do support a lot of the things that she has done. But there's things that aren't being done, and they're far more serious. But I can tell you, working in regulatory and oil and gas, that the infrastructure for net zero is there for monitoring our carbon footprint, at least on an industrial level. I can tell you now, with digital ID being rolled out, that the digital ID is there, how much longer we have before it becomes mandatory. Because we're not going to have Daniel Smith as a premier for 20 years. I'm hoping we actually have a president in 5. So I'm just saying we have to start calling out things and stop defending people that don't have our best interest in heart. There is a lot of greed going on, unfortunately. That's just the system. But each of us can hold ourselves accountable and make sure that when our kids, or if our kids end up being have-nots, that they have the opportunity to climb out of that like I did. I wouldn't have had the opportunity that I had to climb out of where I did in this environment. I would have never made it. I know that 100%. So we are now at a place where we're at a tipping point now where we have to make a decision. And I obviously always encourage everyone to get involved with the Alberta Prosperity Project. And as my friend Patty there said, we want 1 million people, because at 1 million people, nothing is stopping at us. Even if we double in size to 500,000, nothing is stopping us at that point. It only takes 3% of a population to make a fundamental change to society. 3%. But all we need you to do is just be a little bit active, whether it's an hour out of your week, 5 minutes out of your day, just sharing a social media post. But we need people to sign up. And one thing when we were talking about data and your privacy is there are a few people that are afraid to share that data. But I can tell you, the program that we use, it's called Nation Builder. A lot of political parties throughout the U.S. and Canada use that program. We have limited that access to less than a dozen people and very trusted people within our organization. We print out lists of the lists that are pertinent to the areas and give those lists out, like for volunteer lists and stuff like that, out to our regional leaders so that they can obviously phone you guys and get you guys involved. But we are very, very careful with your data. And I hold that as a key responsibility to you guys, and my commitment to you guys is to make sure that your data is safe and that you're not going to end up on some government list. So I don't want people to be afraid to just share their phone number, their email, and their address. That's all we need. We just need you to commit to saying yes to independence. On this Alberta Day, I just want you guys to walk in truth, speak in truth, and value your faith, your family, and your freedom. Thank you guys all so much for listening. And let's make Alberta free again. free.
Thank you so much, Joel. So, as he mentioned, my name is Zane Novak, and yes, I did in 2018 run for the mayorship of Calgary. I was heavily involved from January 1 until the end of May of 2022 with Take Back Alberta, and I was interim CEO for a while when we were really pursuing the objective of getting people on the conservative side activated, motivated, educated, and out making decisions about their future. It's interesting. We all have stories. We all have background. I was never politically motivated for 90% of my life. And then I always had a small business, and then, things were going not bad, and it was May of, I think, 2015. I had a little company, and my daughter and I, we went to a hockey game in Calgary because the Flames were in the playoffs. And we went first and we voted, and that was a provincial election. Went to the hockey game, and by the second period, my phone was exploding because the NDP were in. And my entire world changed. I'd already started to become exposed to politics and the impact they have because I'd sat on the board of many different charitable organizations, nonprofits in Calgary, so that brought me into connection with City Hall, City Council, and primarily Naheed Nenshi, the mayor of Calgary at the time. But when that happened, that Tuesday evening, when the NDP, Rachel Notley, took over Alberta, well, my little world changed. By 10:30 a.m. the next morning, my tiny little company, we lost every single PO we had. It was rescinded because I worked in the oil and gas sector. And she had run on a platform of royalty review, increased corporate tax, no pipelines. And so every oil company immediately just cut all non-necessary spending. And that pulled about $3.5 million of POs off my desk. For my little company, which was my daughter and I hired electricians when I needed to actually go do a job, and none of that ever came back. And so I realized that whether you like it or not, politics does affect you. You can't hide from it. And so one thing led to another, and then I ended up foolishly thinking that I could make a difference in Calgary and ran for mayor. And that was probably the worst time to ever decide you're going to throw your hat into politics. Was 2020, 2021. We had everything with Trudeau. We had everything with Kenney. We had everything with COVID. We then had a federal election in September. We had a municipal election in October. And we ended up having 27 mayoral candidates in Calgary. But I did learn a lot. And, after that election, I had a great volunteer team. But things, and I say this to anybody because we meet, as Cory mentioned, apathy, right? Apathy is something that we're subjected to or we're complacent with or we're a party of in Canada and in Alberta. And it's our own fault, but I'll get into that in a moment. But that, if we don't stand up and decide that we have to make a drastic difference, you better realize it's never going to get better. Doesn't matter who we get in, provincially, municipally, or federally. Alberta is dying a slow death. And there's reasons I say this. It might offend some, but when I was running municipally, I had a very conservative, non-party aligned platform. But with 2 weeks before the election, Instagram, Facebook, Google ads pulled all my ads. Wouldn't answer the phone, you couldn't contact them, couldn't get them reactivated. And we had been trending in the top 2 for public engagement on all social media platforms. They cut us out of the picture, like gone. You couldn't find us. I did a fireside with Danielle Smith in the first part of August, and I had 81,000 views of it. It was pulled.
after the election on October 18th, within a week, all four of the major reporters of the major news feeds like Global, CBC, CTV, Livewire, unbeknownst to each other, every one of them reached out to me and said, Zane, you were the best spoken. You had by far the best platform, but we were told we couldn't interview you, we couldn't carry your story, we couldn't invite you to a debate. If you think that this is going to get better under the current mandate we're under, you're mistaken. I mean, that goes back to the elbows up crowd. Where has that gotten us? You know, nostalgia isn't paying the bills anymore in Canada, and it's sure not paying them in Alberta. I actually had notes because I really wasn't planning on speaking today. So I'm going to apologize. I just said, you know, the media said I was a good speaker. Well, you'll have a different opinion by the end of this one. But, you know, our costs of living are untenable. I have a bunch of friends in the U.S., and every day I'll send pictures back and forth of groceries or rent or what we can buy or what our taxation is. You know, Alberta has the lowest taxation of a province or territory in all of Canada. And every day we hear stories about how unaffordable and unlivable California is, right? California in the U.S. has the highest taxation rate of any state in the U.S. Alberta has the lowest in Canada, but yet we're still exponentially higher than California. The best of Canada for taxation is still massively worse than the worst of the U.S. We have a media that is entirely controlled. I have friends from the U.S. that come up here, and they are just stunned when they open their Facebook or their Instagram or other platforms, and they can't get their news. It's blocked. And they look at me and go, Zane, you are living in a communist country. But yet, we have so many people who are walking down the road here in Alberta of nostalgia. They remember what Canada was. I remember what Canada was. I've lived in numerous other countries. I've lived in the U.S., Mexico, on and on and on. And I always respected those places because they were each unique. And they all had their beauties and their benefits. But man, I was always so happy to get back to Canada. Well, you know what? It's changed. It breaks my heart, but I don't feel that way anymore. I no longer feel I'm a Canadian. I'm no longer proud to wear the Canadian flag. And I never thought I would say that. But it's because of the path that we're on, and because we're in such a controlled situation that most people don't even realize it. You know, it's that old analogy we've heard of 1,000 times, the frog in the water, warm it up till you boil it and cook it. We had been indoctrinated for decades about how incredible our healthcare system is. But I think most of us realize it's not that good anymore. For every man, woman, and child in Canada, on average, taxation privately, corporately pays $9,250. Everybody says, oh, Canada's Medicare is great, you know, this and that, go to the States, you're going to pay everything. I don't know of any of my friends that would pay $9,000 a year in premiums down there privately, but I will tell you this, when they go to an emergency room, they're in now. My daughter was hit in a crosswalk a few years ago, and I rushed her to the hospital, Rocky View in Calgary. She was in there for 8 hours in the waiting room. They finally took her in, x-rayed her. They gave her a glass of water, was it. They wouldn't give her an aspirin, wouldn't give her a Tylenol, wouldn't give her anything for pain. X-rayed her. After several more hours, they discharged her and said, oh, you've just been bruised. Go to your chiropractor, go to your masseuse. So we did. 3 months in, her chiropractor goes, there's something drastically wrong here. Check it out. Oh, yeah, her back was broken 3 places. I mean, that's just a story that affects me and affects my daughter. So now my daughter, who now, you know, at the time she was in her late 20s, she's like 34 now, she has a limited lifespan as far as work. She'll have chronic pain her entire life. And what did the insurance system do for her? Well, got a lawyer, you do all of that. 5 years later, she got enough money to pay her back bills on medical for chiropractic and all of that, and her lawyer. She is 34 years old. The rest of her life is on her own. That's our healthcare system. Now, I do know that there are good people in it. There are good people. There are a few good people in politics, too. But by and large, we are in a system that can't succeed. We have been in an abusive relationship since 1905. And there are only two ways to get out of an abusive relationship. You stand up, you walk out that door, or you die. And I don't want to die, and I don't want my kids to die, and I don't want our grandkids to die. What kind of future is there for us here when we can't afford homes, when we can't afford groceries? I was a solo parent, and I lived in Beaumont. My house was half a block from the high school, and every day I fed about 10 teenage boys. And I was happy to do that, even though I wasn't rich, but I was happy to do that because I knew where they were and I knew they were safe. I now see a family of 4 or 5 walking down the sidewalk, going through a grocery store. Like, how could you do that? How can you afford groceries? I could never afford to feed those kids like I did back in 2008, 2010. Where are we headed? And so we have lots of people we see out there, this Sign Up for Canada thing in Alberta, which is in opposition to us. I go to a ton of farmers markets. I actually have my booth over here selling my homemade lotions. There's a bunch of other vendors here trying to eke out a living. And I go to all these farmers markets, and there are people there with those tables and signing people up, and people are signing up. There's no information. There's nothing there. They're signing up because of nostalgia, not because of education, not because of reality. That burden falls upon us. It falls upon us to inform ourselves, have a few talking points, so we can, without getting a fist fight, explain why we feel independence for Alberta is important. Most of the people we talk to don't have a solid reason other than nostalgia of why they're in love with Canada and want to stay in Canada, and I understand that. I was at a farmer's market in Sundre the other day, and I was talking to a lady there that sells flowers, not you, Wenda, and so I don't know what we were talking, something came up, she goes, "Oh no, you're not one of those separatists." And I go, "Well, actually I am." And she's like, she was just mortified and everything. I said, "Okay." I says, "Name one specific thing that Canada has done to benefit Alberta." And when I say that, I don't mean all the provinces and territories. I mean just Alberta. I said, because I can name billions that Alberta has done to benefit the rest of Canada. You know, whether it's our transfer payments, whether it's overpayment in federal income tax, whether it's overpayment in CPP, like billions and billions. We have provided jobs for everybody in the Maritimes and Ontario and Quebec who fly out here, make huge money, go back to their province and spend it. I said, but name me one thing that Alberta has benefited by that's unique to us. And she stood there for all she could. And then she comes back and she goes, "Our federal parks." And I go, "Oh, well, every province and territory has federal parks. Explain to me how that is uniquely beneficial to us." They go, "Well, it's some of the most beautiful land." I say, "Yeah, but the federal government didn't create that land for us." In fact, in Alberta, 8.2% of our land area is federal parks, national parks, controlled by the federal government. So that means that's taken all our revenue away from that, our ability to access it, our ability to manage it. Look what happened in Jasper. For decades, our government have been telling the federal government, you've got to manage that forest. It is a tinderbox. They ignored, and 156,000 hectares, along with most of Jasper. I lived in Hinton for years. I still have friends and businesses there. Were lost to a fire that the federal government basically wanted staged so that they could say climate change. That also restricts our ability to properly manage those areas, whether it is, maybe it's controlled forestry, whatever it is. We need to do these things, but the government has actually penalized us on something that should be good. Most people don't even take the time to consider that. There are so many areas of taxation. Did you know, I get people who say, "Well, if you don't like it here, move." But do you know that there's a 25% departure tax now in Canada? If you think you're just going to pick up and move to the U.S. and name, or not just the U.S., but Costa Rica, Belize, Portugal, wherever, and have that as your primary residence, even if you don't sell your home, your car, cash out your RSPs, your investments, your business equity, anything, if you take your primary residence out of Canada, you will be assessed and audited, and on your equity, which is those investments, what your home has gained in, in value, you will pay a 25% departure tax. You can't even afford to leave. You're handcuffed here. This really has become, tragically, a communist state. And so for those of you who have the opportunity to talk to someone about why you feel independence is a good option, maybe do what I did. Say, well, name what is benefiting Alberta. And you don't have to be researched, rehearsed, and well-versed on everything, but pick a couple of things. Like maybe you can talk about CPP. You know, we pay in $9 billion. We've never taken out more than $6 billion. So right there, you know, even if you just separated the CPP right there and had it to us, and even if we walked away from the almost $350 billion reserve that we have built, which in the documentation says is ours, even if we walked away from that, we could immediately, just with what we collect here, increase our seniors' benefits by 47%. Wouldn't that be something? I mean, I have a friend down in the States. She's only ever worked, I shouldn't say only, she has worked her entire life, retired now, as a server, a host at a restaurant. She makes almost $3,000 a month. US dollars. Most people here make, what, $1,000, $1,400, something like that, Canadian dollars, where we're paying $400 for a roast at Costco, and she's paying $40. Like, we need to educate ourselves on these particular things. And we need to realize that, you know, if COVID should have done anything for us, it should have made us realize that we need to know our neighbors, who we can trust, who we can turn to, where we can get food, where maybe we get our vehicle fixed, and we need to support each other. But instead, what happened? For the vast majority, stay at home, watch Netflix, order DoorDash, and Amazon. And that is destroying our lives and our communities. There are so many statistical studies out there proving that the 4 cornerstones of happiness in a person's life are family, faith, community, and work. And if you look at where we've been going the last few decades, but particularly the last 5 years, every single one of those pillars are under attack. They've been eroded for years, but in the last 5 years, it's like they've taken a jackhammer to our community, our families, our faith, and our work. This is never going to change unless we take the steps we need right now for independence. A few of the other things it's important to note, lots of people will say, well, if we are, you know, an independent country, how are we going to get to tidewater? Well, international law provides for that. A landlocked country is automatically, by international law, granted rights to tidal water, which is more than Trudeau or Carney has ever done for us. Yeah. Another fact of the matter is people go, oh, well, they just won't recognize you. Well, the interesting fact, in 2008, there are international laws that apply that if you feel that you are being, as an area, region, people, demographic, persecuted, not given fair opportunity, this whole list of things that you can apply and declare yourself an independent state. And that's guaranteed under international law. In 2008, Kosovo did that with Czechoslovakia. And the first 2 countries to recognize Kosovo as an independent nation in 2008 were Japan and Canada. And just what, 2 weeks ago, Carney, for the Liberals, speaking for Canada, has declared the Palestine an independent country. So that doesn't hold up, that we don't have that same right as Kosovo or Palestine or other ones, and Canada has led the way in supporting them. So we have international law on our side. We have the fact that our benefits financially, as far as freedom, all those types of things would just increase. To give you an example, like with the markets that I do, prior COVID, you know, you could go as a vendor at a farmer's market and your sales would be up here. After COVID, they'd be here. This year, compared to last year, my sales are 30 to 50% less. Why? Well, it's not that people still don't go out for a walk and enjoy the farmer's market. It's because we don't have any spending cash. Our discretionary spending in the richest province in Canada is almost nil. I used to go to farmers markets, and everyone, I'd spend $100 to $200 at other people's booths, supporting them, but also because I needed their product. I can't even do that anymore because I usually only make $100. And we are on a trajectory to continue going that way at an accelerated platform, accelerated progress. The only way out of that is for us to look at the path of independence and all that that brings. We need to have that voice. We need to educate ourselves. We need to have good talking points so when we have the opportunity to calmly discuss with others why we have this viewpoint, engage them in a conversation. It's education, education, education. It's not nostalgia. Nostalgia is not paying our bills. Nostalgia will not buy our children homes. Nostalgia will not give them good jobs. And I'm going to touch briefly on immigration. And I want to just first of all explain a little bit of my history. On my father's side, I'm Ukrainian. My grandparents on my father's side escaped Ukraine right at the Holodomor. They came over in 1931 or 1932, and they lived near North Battleford in a tiny little town called, well, it wasn't a town, there was 2 buildings, Highgate. It's gone now, been gone for decades. And they were absolutely broke. But this gave them an opportunity. Coming to Canada gave them an opportunity. My last name is Novak, and there are lots of Novaks around. In Czechoslovakia, those areas, Novak is almost like Smith. And so I get lots of people who go, oh, do you know this Novak from here, that Novak from there? And I go, no, the only Novak that is related to me in North America is my daughter Carmia, because when my grandparents left, every other Novak was killed at the hands of communism and Stalin. Well, my grandparents came over here, and they were so privileged. They were so broke. When my grandmother went into labor with my dad, they couldn't get to the hospital. There was no doctor. There was only the butcher who was drunk. And so that's who they had to help with the delivery. And it went bad, so he performed a C-section, actually cut my dad's ear off, so my dad only had 1 ear his whole life. But they were so grateful to be here. They eventually got a homestead by Lloydminster, and they never sent money back to Ukraine. They never went back to Ukraine. They never voted for Ukraine. Nothing against Ukraine. They were Canadians. And they taught their kids English. And they were proud, so proud to be part of the Canadian community. They were settlers. They broke the land. My dad picked up buffalo bones they could ship them to England to make buttons off the land that they broke. What we have now is colonization by mass immigration. We can roll back taxes, we can roll back restrictions, we can roll back legislation, but I'll tell you what, we are at a fulcrum point where if we don't make hard decisions now about our future, the opportunity will never come again. Muammar Gaddafi said about 35 years ago, we will conquer Europe without firing a single bullet. We will go in and we will have 10 or 15 kids. We'll use your democratic system to vote. We will vote you out and we will take control and we won't have to fire a gun. Well, what do we see in the UK? What do we see in Europe? What do we see in Australia? What do we see in Canada? That's exactly what we see. We have a small window of opportunity here, people. We fortunately, whether you like Orange Man bad or not, he will back us up. That type of administration will back us up if we decide to make a move. This may not occur again. Immigration may overcome our ability to ever have a voice in our own country again. I have no problem with immigration. I have no problem with immigrants. But they need to be vetted, they need to be Canadians, they need to put our values first, and they need to stop sending all of the money they make here to a country that they don't even like and wouldn't live in. They need to stop trying to make our country into the country they wouldn't even live in. 86% of immigration is Muslim, which is fine. 56 countries are Muslim, and none of them go there. Why is that? I think the words that Muammar Gaddafi spoke decades ago are coming to fruition terrifyingly for us right here in our own backyard, our own country. So yeah, sad to say I'm no longer proud, and this breaks my heart to say that I'm Canadian, but I'm damn proud to be an Albertan. And I hope that we all stand up and do what's right for our future generations. Thank you.